Any members who wish to speak need to stand to ensure that they catch my eye at the beginning of the debate. I would say to members that if the debate becomes very repetitive, we may have to consider whether it would be appropriate to accept an early closure motion. Finally, members may well be aware of the rules relating to good temper, moderation in parliamentary language. Today's proceedings are on a substantive motion relating to the specific responses by the Prime Minister to this House. It is perfectly in order for honourable members to question the veracity of those responses cited in the motion, or whether or not they were misleading. However, it is not in order to challenge in more general terms of truthfulness of the Prime Minister. Right. The Right Honourable Member for North West Essex has tabled the motion for debate on the matter of privilege, which I have agreed should take precedence today. I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Kevin Murdoch, to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the motion standing in my name on the order paper. Mr. Speaker, shall we pick up where we left off last Tuesday, when we had an emergency debate about the government's accountability to Parliament over Peter Mandelson's appointment as our ambassador to the United States? The very next day, at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister read out selective quotes from Sir Ollie Robbins' evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and deliberately left out critical sections to make it seem as if Sir Ollie Robbins' evidence had exonerated him. The Prime Minister told the House, and I quote, "No pressure existed whatsoever in relation to this case." That is not what the record shows. Let me read Sir Ollie Robbins' exact quote. "Throughout January, my office and the Foreign Secretary's office were under constant pressure. There was an atmosphere of constant chasing." So how can the Prime Minister tell us that Sir Ollie Robbins said no pressure existed whatsoever? Everybody heard what Ollie Robbins said. We are not here to test whether members have good hearing. People can go and look in Hansard. The question today, as the Speaker said, is whether this should go to the Privileges Committee, whether this House and Labour MPs really believe in full due process, whether Labour MPs have the integrity to refer the Prime Minister to the Privileges Committee, knowing what we all know and can all read in Hansard. The Ministerial Code is very clear. Ministers who mislead the House must correct the record, and I quote, "at the earliest opportunity." It is very obvious that the Prime Minister, what the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box was not correct. It's clear that full due process was not followed. If Labour MPs allow the whips to force them to block the consequences of these decisions, it will degrade not just them, but this House. The question is, what kind of people are they? Are they people who will live up to the promises they made about standards and the rules mattering, or are they people who abandon their promises to be complicit in a cover-up? Yes, I will give way.
To the Right Honourable Lady, on the 4th of February we passed our humble address here in this House with a unanimous vote of, well, a unanimous opinion of the whole House that all of the documents should be made available and published. And those that wait for the question, and those that were considered sensitive should go to the Intelligence and Security Committee. Her party accepted that amendment on the 4th of February. If she wasn't going to wait for the outcome of that, why is she moving this process today?
I think that is an excellent question. We asked for the release of documents, and then when the evidence came showing what the Cabinet Secretary had said in November 24 about what full due process was, it was very clear that those instructions had not been followed. We also know that this latest information about the problems with the security vetting did not come from the humble address, it came from a leak to The Guardian. So why should we wait for a never-never process that is clearly not happening? Even members of the Intelligence and Security Committee in that SA24 debate last week said that there were delays to the release of the documents. So, Mr. Speaker, members opposite want to pretend that this is something that only one party is doing. Can I remind them that this is a cross-party motion supported by independents, the Lib Dems, the DUP, the SNP, members from across this House? Calling this a stunt is disrespecting this House and disrespecting the Speaker. It's very obvious, listening to the media and their tweets, it's very obvious they've all been told to come here today, tell everybody it's a stunt, tell everybody it's a stunt. Why are they acting like sheep? Why are they acting like sheep? They should be better than that. We will be counting, by the way, some people might even be shouting bingo, at how many times people stand up and say that this is a stunt in this debate. We're looking forward to it. Mr. Speaker, there is a... Yes, I will give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. I think she's being a little too harsh to the limited number of Labour MPs opposite. I mean, here we have the entire reputation of the Prime Minister of this country, the leader of their party, and they're not turning out for him because they know that he is now a laughingstock, and having called round them, they found out they had to put a 3-line whip to get them to protect his blushes. So, can my right honourable friend be a little bit kinder to the members opposite, especially the brave ones who are actually prepared to come out and defend the indefensible?
I thank my right honourable friend for that intervention. I will do my best to be kind, because he is right. There are more people here today than there were last time, so the whips have really been working hard in the last 7 days. Last week, not a single Labour MP bothered to intervene. Now, we've got a second one. I'm going to take an intervention from the right honourable gentleman, and then I'll come to the Labour MP.
Very grateful to the Leader of the Opposition. She's right to highlight the cross-party nature of this motion and also question the applicability of a whip in refusing a motion before the House. Does she not agree, and should Labour MPs not consider that if there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear?
The honourable gentleman makes an excellent point. I completely agree with him, and in fact I will be making that case in due course, but I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Well, I thank her for giving way. And a moment ago, she talked about selective quoting, and I'm sure that she would not want to selectively quote Sir Ollie Robbins herself. So could she tell us what the rest of that quote was? And when he talked about pressure, was he talking about pressure to deliver a decision in time for President Trump's inauguration, or was he saying that he felt pressure to materially change what that decision would be? Because that is quite an important distinction, is it not?
It is quite important, and if it was, why didn't the Prime Minister say so last week? Why didn't he say no pressure whatsoever? He should go and read the Hansard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, I will give way on that point.
Friend, for giving way on that point. Are we really suggesting in this debate in this chamber that anyone who does not fully, comprehensively, without any hesitation, pass vetting should be given the most important role in our ambassadorship? The opposition seem to be suggesting that someone who is borderline, that there are any red flags, should be put in this sort of role. Is that not absolutely extraordinary?
That's not due process.
It is extraordinary, and the evidence which we've heard from the Foreign Affairs Select Committee this morning is only making this matter worse for the Prime Minister. So it is very wrong for them to be talking about a stunt. This is about the integrity of this House. Why is the Privileges Committee only a political stunt when Labour is in the dock? Do they still believe that honesty and accountability matter when it is one of their own? Do they believe that Labour Prime Ministers should be held to the exact same standards that they held Conservative Prime Ministers to? Or do they believe that there should be an honesty discount because the Prime Minister is Labour? The fact that there are so few Cabinet Ministers sitting on the front bench, they've had to dig deep to the bottom of the barrel for junior ministers to come and sit there, I think shows that they're struggling to get support for this. But let me tell Labour, I'm going to make some progress, Mr. Speaker. I would say very gently, in fact kindly, I would say kindly to Labour MPs, as I've been asked to, that if they vote against this motion today, they are admitting that Labour has lower standards and should be held to a lower standard than everyone else. Because when they were elected, they promised their constituents integrity and higher standards, and I'm sure for most of them at the time they meant it. This country is the mother of all parliaments. This vote today is about Parliament. It's not about the Labour Party. It is about the Prime Minister being held to account. To those people saying this is a stunt, this is about whether the Prime Minister is accountable not just to the opposition, but to them and their own constituents. Members opposite may believe that the Prime Minister is telling the truth. As the Speaker said, they are not being asked whether the Prime Minister is telling the truth. They are being asked whether the committee should investigate whether the Prime Minister told the truth. That is a different thing. The question is whether there is a case to answer that he misled this House and has failed to correct the record. Yes, I will give way.
Can I thank the right honourable member for giving way? The British public are already fed up with politicians. We see that in general elections, the low turnout rate. What we have here is a prime example of why the British public has lost confidence. We are trying to shield and hide from the public the truth. Does the right honourable member agree that in order to restore that trust, this Prime Minister must be put in front of the committee?
I do agree that this is a matter of trust with the public. We have to show that we do things properly here. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, the question is whether there is a case to answer that the Prime Minister misled this House and has failed to correct the record. If there is a credible case that he did, then this matter should be referred to the Committee of Privileges. Those are the rules of the House. Let me quickly run through the facts to make sure that every Labour MP hears them. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister appointed Peter Mandelson before security vetting was granted, in direct contravention of the advice given to him on the 11th of November 2024 by the then Cabinet Secretary. That is not due process. The Prime Minister's own National Security Advisor described the appointment and due diligence as weirdly rushed, and the Foreign Office weren't asked to feed in. That is not due process. The chair of the Labour Party has a lot to say, so I'm going to give way and let her say what it is that she wants to. Would you like to speak up? Yes.
The Cabinet Secretary said that it was due process.
Mr. Speaker, I think we have another minister who has just come to the dispatch box and said something that is quite different. Simon Case, the then Cabinet Secretary, has set out what the full due process was. A note from the Cabinet Minister a year after the appointment, after Peter Mandelson had been sacked, after I asked questions at the dispatch box, is not an exoneration, it is part of the cover-up. Mr. Speaker, we have been told by Sir Ollie Robbins, that the former Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, that the government showed a dismissive attitude to vetting and even argued that Peter Mandelson did not need any vetting. That is not due process. I'll give way in a moment. We have been told that Number 10 put constant pressure on the Foreign Office to approve the application. That is not due process. Sir Philip Barton, the former Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, said he was, and I quote, presented with a decision that there was no space for dialogue. That's Philip Barton this morning. He also confirmed that the normal order is vetting and then announcement. But in this case, the announcement was before the vetting. That is not due process. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
First of all, can I thank the opposition leader for bringing this forward and for their introduction. Does the opposition leader agree that there is a very dangerous pattern emerging in government judgment and bypassing vetting? to appoint Lord Mandelson, a man with a well-documented security concerns? And does the opposition leader also express concern about handpicking an Attorney-General whose hands are still warm from the working of defending Gerry Adams against the very victims of IRA terror? It is little wonder that the people of this nation are concerned out there in the streets. They're worried, they're concerned, and well done to the opposition leader in bringing this forward.
Order. Sorry. You're straying outside the debate, Mr Shannon, and we mustn't do that. Convene.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am concerned about the Prime Minister's judgment on all manner of issues, not just the one that we're discussing today. But we've heard this morning, Mr Speaker, that even the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff says that it shouldn't have been him doing the due diligence, and that what he got back from Mandelson wasn't the full truth, but the Prime Minister appointed Peter Mandelson anyway. That's Morgan McSweeney saying that is not full due process. On several counts, Mr Speaker, it is clear the full due process was in fact not followed in this appointment. They shouldn't worry, I will let them give way because I want them to make fools of themselves at every opportunity. So just be patient, I will give way in a moment. Even the Prime Minister's current position, Mr Speaker, contains a glaring logical inconsistency. How can he say that full process was followed and at the same time fire Sir Ollie Robbins for not following process? If the honourable gentleman would answer that question, that would be fantastic.
I asked the shadow opposition leader the questions. That's how it works on an intervention. And can I also suggest to her that if she wants backbenchers to support her motion, she shouldn't be insulting us and calling us shit. Now, I think that the critical question that a lot of backbenchers are wanting to know here is why now? Why, when the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has not concluded its investigations, has she brought this motion forward now? Is it because there is local elections next week, or is that a coincidence?
I'm sorry. The decision was made on the letter that's been sent to me, not on whether somebody may be meeting somewhere else. It is judged on that merit. I don't need to be questioned again.
Mr Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman would like his ministerial job back. That's the only explanation for why he was asking that question. So I did ask, if full due process was followed, why was Sir Ollie Robbins sacked? No answer. The Privileges Committee is clear that misleading intentionally or recklessly, refusing to answer legitimate questions or failing to correct misleading statements impedes or frustrates the functioning of the House and is a contempt. That's what the Privileges Committee says. The Prime Minister has not answered legitimate questions on this appointment. They were all there at PMQs when I asked him whether he spoke to Peter Mandelson before the appointment about 6 times, and the Prime Minister refused to answer. Contempt. This is no longer just about the appointment of Peter Mandelson or the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This is about whether or not the Prime Minister should be referred for contempt of Parliament. The Honourable Member for Warwick and Leamington said last week, I don't know if he is in the chamber, he said last week that the Prime Minister is a man of the utmost decency who would never, ever lie. If that is the case, they should welcome this chance to prove that. If they really believed that statement, they would not have to be whipped to block an investigation. The privileges... Yes, I will give way to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
I'm grateful for the Right Honourable Lady giving way. She will know that I was never a fan of Boris Johnson. No. You did it so well. But when there was a similar motion before the House to refer Mr Johnson to the Privileges Committee, his side was not whipped. Can she confirm that? And can she question why the government is whipping its side on this matter?
That is an excellent question from the right honourable gentleman. I can confirm that this side was not whipped. I can also confirm that the leader of the head of the Privileges Committee was a former acting leader of the Labour Party. We trusted this House to do the right thing. Why can they not do the same? Why? Mr. Speaker, the Privileges Committee is made up mostly of Labour MPs. Are they saying that they do not believe that their own colleagues would give the Prime Minister a fair hearing? Are they saying that? If this was just a bad decision that he's apologised for, then surely the Privileges Committee will find him not guilty. I give way to my right honourable friend.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Prime Minister is pursuing a scorched earth policy? Advisor after civil servant has been chucked under the bus to save his skin, and now it is the turn of his own MPs. For if the Prime Minister had not misled the House, then the correct path is to go to the Privileges Committee so the Prime Minister can clear his name.
I do agree with my right honourable friend. This is a scorched earth policy, and they are the earth, and I'm afraid to say they are being scorched. Let me ask them this, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, why is he whipping to avoid scrutiny? Why? Why is he whipping? They are being whipped today to exonerate him before the facts have even been tested. It is not for the first time I am having to tell Labour MPs that they are being stitched up. This is a man who has led them up and down so many hills. Our Education Secretary wants to intervene. Would she like to talk about the U-turn yesterday on social media? No, she doesn't want to. Shame. We got our U-turn, Mr. Speaker. We got our U-turn. They have to sit there looking embarrassed at every decision that they have to row back on. This is a man who has led them up and down so many hills. He sends them out to defend the indefensible even this afternoon, and it's a great effort by the whips, I must say. I know someone else wants to intervene. Please go on.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do thank her for giving way. And of course, she's right that the Conservatives did get a free vote on the Partygate scandal. She chose to abstain, which is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. The bigger disgrace. The bigger disgrace was voting against Acts on own. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bigger disgrace was voting against action on Owen Parson, and she voted against that. Another disgrace, whipped.
Mr. Speaker, I actually feel bad at having to make this explanation. And I say to my right honourable friend, I am trying to be kind, but there was no vote, so no abstention, because not a single one of us voted to block the investigation. This is a clear example of the sit down. Mr. Speaker, this. I'm not giving way. He's had his chance, Mr. Speaker. This just goes.
If the Honourable Lady, right Honourable Lady, gives way, that's fine. You've had one crack at the whip. I wouldn't try too many cracks.
Mr. Speaker, this is why I am telling. I know a lot of Labour MPs have not been in this situation before. They are being stitched up. I am trying to be helpful. This man has led them up so many hills and down again. U-turn after U-turn. I talked about banning social media for children. There was also a U-turn on the pensions mandation. This is a government that does not know what it is doing. It is a government that does not know what it is doing. And I think it's very valiant of them to come out to defend the Prime Minister. This is despite the fact that he took the whip away from MPs who wanted to lift the two-child benefit cap. And then he did it anyway. The member for Hayes and Harlington had the whip removed for opposing the two-child benefit cap. Then the Prime Minister U-turned. The member for York Central had the whip removed for voting against the Prime Minister's welfare reforms. Then he ditched the reforms. And then the member for Penrith, who had the whip removed for opposing the family farm tax. The Prime Minister's ditched that, but the member for Penrith still doesn't have the whip back. And this matters, Mr. Speaker.
I know. It is about the privilege motion. I know you're developing a theme, but I think we've run out of theme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're absolutely right. I'm just pointing out the question, why is this a whip vote? It will still happen anyway. This man has ruined the reputation of the Labour Party, has not been loyal to his own MPs, and I don't think that they are united. Morgan... Yes, I will give way.
Dr. Luke. When the Prime Minister came in, he said he wanted to do things differently. He's had not one but two opportunities to, in an emergency debate tabled by this side of the House, to come to the House and answer all these questions, so he wouldn't need to go to a Privileges Committee. Can she advise on why he may not have come to the House to answer on both two occasions?
I think it is an excellent question from my honourable friend. Why not come to the House to correct the record at the earliest opportunity on multiple occasions? What is there to hide? We are hearing evidence in the select committees that is conflicting what is being said on the floor of the House. I would be very interested, by the way, if the Minister, when he is responding, is happy to repeat the Prime Minister's words at the dispatch box that there was no pressure whatsoever. Would he repeat that question? Would he repeat that statement? Let's see how brave he is. Mr. Speaker, this is absolutely critical. This cannot just be a debate about the Labour Party or a division between those who are on the inner circle and those who are on the outside. Again and again, we have seen the children of the chosen ones, people who had never been in Parliament before, getting all the best jobs. We now have the sacked Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. His wife is a whip, telling people to vote for a cover-up. That is not right. That is not right. They are hanging... She has been notified. She has been notified. I know they don't like it. Have I said something that is not true? No. I'm speaking the truth. I know it hurts, but someone has to point it out. They are hanging everyone else out to dry, and I cannot believe that Labour MPs are letting this happen again. I know that a lot of them are expecting a reshuffle after the May election. Let me tell them, it is not worth it. I say directly to those Labour MPs hoping to be ministers after May the 7th, you will condemn yourself to being sent out on the morning round to repeat things that you know are not true, that you don't believe in, and that you know will end in disaster. And they will end in disaster, Mr. Speaker, as everything the Prime Minister touches does. This vote should not be about loyalty to the Prime Minister, but about standards. Why should Labour MPs ruin their reputations to save a man who has never shown loyalty to them? He has shown that he will throw everybody under a bus. Sue Gray, Morgan McSweeney, Sir Chris Wilmord, Sir Ollie Robbins. Do Labour MPs really think that if this goes wrong, he's not going to throw all of them under a bus? There are some of them walking around Parliament telling everyone that they're going to be one-term MPs, and so it doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. Because when they leave this place, no one is going to remember what their whips told them to do. People will only remember that they voted for a cover-up. That is what will follow them around like a bad smell until the end of their careers. That's what's going to be in their Wikipedia entries. Yes, I will give way.
Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this issue will be resolved in one or two places? It will either be resolved in the Court of Public Opinion or in front of the Privileges Committee. And it's actually in the Prime Minister's interests to have it resolved by a cross-party committee of this House, which would give confidence to the public that the truth had been found, that the case had been made or not, and that they would have confidence going forward. The public will make up its own mind without the Privileges Committee.
Yes. That's right. The Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. I trust the Privileges Committee to do the right thing, as I always have. And I've got some advice for Labour MPs. There is nothing wrong, yes, there is nothing wrong with giving your party leader the benefit of the doubt. There's nothing wrong with that. As a minister 4 years ago, I gave my party... I don't know why they're laughing. I haven't got to the punchline yet. Hang on, wait for it. As a minister 4 years ago, I gave my party leader the benefit of the doubt, but I trusted the Privileges Committee to do the right thing, even when it was led by a former leader of the Labour Party. We did not block the Privileges Committee looking to things, and the minute that I was asked to go out and say something that wasn't true, I resigned. None of them want to do that. I will always be able to hold my head up high because I did the right thing. I do not understand why Labour MPs are quite happy repeating things that aren't true. We have all seen the Hansard. That's the difference between them and us. When we get things wrong, we put our hands up and say so. They pretend, Mr. Speaker, they pretend that the wrong thing is actually the right thing. They pretend that the bad thing is actually a good thing because it's Labour MPs who are doing it. That's what they're being whipped to do today. It's the same way the Mandelson appointment happened. Because they thought they were appointing him, it must be a good thing. That's what's happening again today. They are being whipped to do the wrong thing. If they are telling the entire country that nothing matters, in a moment, if they are telling the entire country that nothing matters except avoiding scrutiny of this Prime Minister who won't answer questions at that dispatch box, then they're telling people that the Labour Party is not worth voting for. It does not exist. That this is not the Labour Party of Attlee and Bevan and Wilson. That Labour Party no longer exists because they would never do this. They would never be voting for someone who had stood at that dispatch box less than a week ago and read out doctored statements from the head of the Foreign Office like the Prime Minister did. Yes, I will give way. I will give way.
On the point of reading out statements, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. I can see that she's enjoying reading out her statement. But what I can't see is the case that she is making about the Privileges Committee. What I can't see is what she doesn't think is right about a criminal investigation, about inquiries that are consistently being made about the decision that was made that we have accepted was wrong. What's wrong with the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and what's wrong with the processes that are in?
I'm sorry, you're out of scope. Come here.
Perhaps she should have just taken the whip's questions instead of messing that one up. She does raise an interesting point about the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. It's only looking at Mandelson. It's not looking into the issue of the Prime Minister misleading the House. Let's stop pretending that the Select Committee is a massive inquiry. It really isn't. Yes.
Mr. Rushworth, are you sure it's point of order? Sure. Let's hear it.
A moment ago, the Leader of the Opposition described the statement read by the Prime Minister as doctored. Now, doctored is akin to saying that it was dishonest, that it was lying. Is that not unparliamentary language, Mr. Speaker?
Oh, no. As I suspected, it's not a point of order. You need to read the rule book. This is a substantive motion. This isn't the normal debate. So please, it might be helpful if you took some time out rather than question. You might be onto something, but it's not today.
Mr. Speaker, time and time again throughout this debate, I've seen Labour MPs stand up showing that they do not understand what the rules are or what this is about. This is not about whether or not, this is not about the specific statements, this is about whether or not we should have a referral to the Privileges Committee. They are moving the goalposts because they don't want to answer that simple question. And they've come up with all sorts of excuses. It is not an excuse to say that there is a war on. The Prime Minister has said repeatedly that we are not in this war. He can't have it both ways. At every turn, he has tried to deny this House full transparency over this appointment. We had a vote in the House for documents to be released, and yet we discover that documents are not being released. That is a contempt of this Parliament. Labour MPs supported that humble address because they knew that we needed to see the truth. Documents from that release show due process was not followed. The ISC is complaining that the documents are being delayed. We only discovered there were numerous problems with Mandelson's vetting because of a leak to The Guardian. The truth is being covered up. Today's vote is about whether they want to be complicit in this cover-up. If they vote against that investigation by the Privileges Committee, they are in this together. This motion is supported across the House, Mr. Speaker, including by Labour MPs, which is why they have to be whipped to vote against it. The member for Hull East was tweeting, saying that he was making a referral to privileges last week before he deleted that tweet. This week, he is calling it a stunt. Why? Who's twisting his arm? Why was it not a stunt last week when he was doing it, but it's a stunt this week when everybody else is doing it? Why? For those who are mindlessly repeating the lines the Labour whips have given them, may I remind them that it is also their job to hold the government to account and uphold the standards of our democracy. Appointing a known national security risk to be ambassador to the United States is a profound failure of government. Do they not think that it is important the Prime Ministers tell the truth on a matter of national security? Or do they think that this is an internal Labour Party matter that they can fix themselves? And for those people who believe that Andy Burnham is coming to rescue them, can I just say that if they vote against this investigation, there will be so much contempt for Labour that there is no by-election on this planet that Andy Burnham will be able to win. This is not an internal Labour Party matter, Mr. Speaker. Do they believe that when something is wrong, we should look into it? This is about whether they believe that Prime Ministers should not destroy the careers of civil servants to cover up for their own failures. I know it is very difficult for Labour MPs to walk through the lobby with other parties. But let me be clear what they are saying if they vote against this motion. Would they rather be on the side of Peter Mandelson, of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, of Morgan McSweeney and Matthew Doyle, on the side of the man who sacked Sir Chris Wormald, sacked Sir Ollie Robbins, Sue Gray? Is that what they came to Parliament for? Yesterday, we read that the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent South said we should do this so she could pay off her new kitchen. Do they really want to tell their constituents that they voted against this inquiry because they are more concerned about their own personal finances than probity in public life? Because that is a shocking statement. Every MP voting on this motion today will need to examine their conscience on all sides of the House, Mr. Speaker. This is not a matter of party loyalty. It is a matter of what each and every one of us believes is right. They are being asked to defend a man who has let the country down, he has let Parliament down, and let's be honest, he has let the Labour Party down. So I say to Labour MPs today, you can defend the Prime Minister today, and there are enough of you to get through the vote, but you will be complicit in a shameful abandoning of promises made to the electorate, promises every Labour MP stood on. It is up to them what kind of MP they choose to be. They can choose to live up to their promises on standards to ensure proper scrutiny takes place and allow the Privileges Committee to get to the bottom of this, or they can choose to put party before country. Their vote will define them, and the public is watching. They say it's a stunt, then let the inquiry expose it. They say there's no evidence of misleading the House, then let the committee test it. They say the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, then they shouldn't vote to stop the Prime Minister being scrutinised. They don't have to defend this. They can still do the right thing. They can show that Parliament matters. It matters more than any party or any faction. They can vote to enhance Parliament, or they can vote and prove the worst fears of people who think there is one rule for Labour and another rule for everyone else. Mr. Speaker, I commend this motion to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper. Emma Lowell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have watched this whole sorry saga play out for weeks now. Like the public, I feel let down, disappointed, and I am angry. Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed. This was a fundamental failure of judgment. Matthew Doyle should never have been given a peerage. This was also a failure of judgment. I feel the way that today's vote has been handled by the government smacks once again of being out of touch and disconnected from the public mood. The fact that MPs like me are being whipped into voting against this motion is, in my view, wrong, Mr. Speaker. It has played into the terrible narrative that there is something to hide, and good, decent colleagues will be accused of being complicit in a cover-up. A number of weeks ago, at a private meeting with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, I spoke about how, after a career of working so closely with victims of child sexual abuse, that I could not even begin to express how much it hurts me when people are screaming at me in the street that I am a member of the Pedo Protectors Party. I also said that prior to this scandal, people criticised the government's policies and at times lack of political narrative. But to me, they are now questioning the government's moral compass. My comments were leaked almost immediately by colleagues who were present. My words were then used later by the Leader of the Opposition. Recent weeks have since seen such abuse intensify and ongoing abuse and threats to mine and my staff's safety continue. Privilege motions ISC investigations, committee hearings and process don't come up on the doorstep. What does come up time and time again is a general feeling that there is something just not right, that politicians are failing to deliver on their promises. Trust has gone and it's been replaced by anger, and the already fragile fabric of our democracy is eroding further every day this continues. This Prime Minister is very careful with his words and does have respect for the office he holds. He does want to change this country for the better, and he truly believes in public service, something which in recent years may have been sorely lacking from previous Prime Ministers. So I can't understand, Mr Speaker, why the Prime Minister doesn't refer himself to the committee with a clear statement that he is doing so to clear his name. One quick session of the committee could surely see this matter concluded. Instead, it will now drag on and dominate every headline and interview. It will overshadow and undermine every good policy we make and continue to drag every single one of us down. Whether any Prime Minister misled the House or not is not a matter for the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, nor is it a matter for the Intelligence and Security Committee. It is a matter for privileges. That's why such a committee exists. It may be that opposition parties are using this motion today to box Labour MPs in, but I'm not angry about that. That's politics. Some of us here would do the same. But I know one thing for certain today, Mr Speaker, that I will not be voting against this motion, but I want to listen carefully to the rest of this debate because, like everyone, when I came to this House, I wanted to do the right thing, and I hope I continue to do that for however long I have left in this place.
Sir Ed David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Mr Speaker, it's an honour to follow the Honourable Lady, the member for South Shields, who I think has made a very powerful speech. And I think we all, on all sides, listen to it, and I hope her colleagues on the government benches listen to it and think about it carefully during the passage of this debate. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister called this motion a stunt. That is not why I put my name to it. But it's funny, though. I was just checking whether they were awake, Mr Speaker. But it is funny, though, because stunt is exactly the same word Boris Johnson used about the motion that the Prime Minister and I tabled 4 years ago, referring Boris Johnson to the Privileges Committee. Ironic, Alanis Morissette could probably write a whole album about it. It wasn't a stunt then, and it isn't a stunt today. It is, as the Prime Minister said back then, a motion that, and I quote, seeks to defend the simple principle that honesty, integrity and telling the truth matter in our politics. Honesty, integrity, telling the truth. These things matter in our nation's parliament perhaps more than anywhere else. And when I hear the Prime Minister complain that we've tabled this motion just over a week before important elections, I find myself transported back to that debate 4 years ago, 7 days before crucial local elections. At that time, Conservative MP after Conservative MP made exactly the same bogus argument in defence of Boris Johnson. So I do have to say, although there are differences in the whipping arrangements, I do find it very hard to take some of the sanctimony from the leader of the Conservative Party seriously. She and her Conservative colleagues propped up Boris Johnson back then. She called him a great Prime Minister, and even after the game was up and Johnson was gone, she dismissed the Partygate scandal and called it overblown. So it does seem there's quite a lot of hypocrisy to go round, Mr Speaker. But I want to try and be consistent. So I look back in Hansard at what I said back then. And I was struck that I can use exactly the same words today. With families facing the deepest fall in the living standards since the 1950s, with the pain of energy bills and rising food prices compounded by the government's unfair tax rises, we know that our constituents are facing real hardship. It's not just a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of living emergency. At such a time, the country needs a government that will be focused on tackling that economic emergency. Crucially, it needs a government that it can trust. Labour members agreed with me back then. I hope they will still agree with those words now. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
thank the honourable member for giving way. He's mentioned Boris Johnson a few times, so I just wanted to remind the House that Boris Johnson misled the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and his words about my constituent, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, meant that she spent 6 extra years in jail for a crime she didn't commit. He had multiple opportunities to apologise, including when he saw Nazanin face to face. Does the honourable member think when someone has made a mistake, especially someone in a position of power, they should apologise?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can see from your letters in the chair that you don't necessarily want me to go down that particular avenue, but I hope I speak for others that we can reflect on how incredibly depressing it is that nothing has really changed. The British people are facing a cost of living emergency. They need a government focused on tackling it. They need a government they can trust. But instead, this is what we've got. A Prime Minister who promised to be different, who promised to turn the page, who promised above everything else change, but who has now mired this government in the same endless cycle of chaos and scandal as the last one. A Prime Minister who appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, even though his links to Jeffrey Epstein had been widely reported, even though those reports had been brought directly to the Prime Minister's attention, even though the Cabinet Secretary had advised him that security clearance should be acquired before the choice was confirmed. A Prime Minister who, despite all that, still told the House repeatedly that full due process was followed. A Prime Minister who says no pressure existed whatsoever to appoint Mandelson, even despite all the evidence we've heard to the contrary, as the Right Honourable Lady set out in her speech. And now a Prime Minister who desperately claims that he wouldn't have appointed Mandelson if he had known about UK security vetting's recommendation. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said we would find what he told us to be incredible, and we do. But I think it's that last part that is the most incredible of all. Does he really expect us to believe that after all of that, ignoring the clear warnings from the Propriety and Ethics team, ignoring the advice of his then Cabinet Secretary to get the security vetting done first, ignoring everything we already knew about Peter Mandelson, and announcing his appointment to the world before the vetting had been done, does the Prime Minister really expect us to believe that if he'd been given the same recommendation as Ollie Robbins, that it was a borderline case, that he'd have cancelled the appointment? Do honourable members opposite really believe that's what would have happened? Because that claim is now all that's left of the Prime Minister's case for the defence, and I'm afraid it just doesn't stand up. So, Mr. Speaker, I will finish not with my own words, but with the words of another honourable member 4 years ago, the now right honourable member for Ashton-under-Lyne. I know her words carry a lot of weight on Labour benches. She said, and I quote, "The only way to get to the bottom of this issue and regain public confidence in our democracy is by respecting the processes that have been created to enshrine the rules of our Parliament. I point out that process we are following today is in place only because the Prime Minister has failed to do the decent thing and resign. I repeat, honesty, integrity and the truth matter in our politics. Today, MPs across the House have the opportunity to defend those principles and to vote to support our democracy." Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady was right back then. That is the opportunity before MPs today, and I urge us all to take it.
Brenda Singh-Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I spoke in the emergency motion debate, and I spoke about the appointment of Peter Mandelson in the first instance, the approach taken by the Prime Minister as details have become available, and finally the vetting process overall. Today I want to address the motion and why I feel it's premature. And in doing so, I believe there are 3 principles of this House that are key to our consideration today, and that is transparency, due process and proportionality. A privileged motion is a serious matter and a tool available for Parliament to use in such circumstances. And whilst the motion is there to address such matters, it is also the case that use of a privileged motion impacts on the integrity of the House and its procedures. and deploying a privileged motion prematurely or in the absence of full and proper grounds has the ability to impact negatively on the integrity of the House. And I am clear that any allegations or concerns must be addressed.
Refer the member to the words of the Speaker earlier. It's the Speaker that decides whether or not a privilege motion goes ahead. So he's criticising the Speaker for having allowed it.
He received a...
So my point is about what our consideration of it, the fact that the Speaker has decided we are here discussing it, and I'm putting a case forward about why I think it's premature to vote for it today. Just because the Leader of the Opposition and others have decided to put it does not make it right. It's clearly a political and partisan process. And I'm very clear that any allegations or concerns must be addressed, and it's quite clear that the Prime Minister is clearly of this view as well, and which is why we have the humble address, why we've got ongoing inquiries by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and even an ongoing police investigation. It is right and proper that all allegations should be examined thoroughly, and that these processes should be allowed to run their course. And whilst there is all that is all ongoing, I would suggest this privileged motion is premature.
Who's giving a powerful speech. He said that all allegations should be investigated properly. Well, with greatest respect to him, the Foreign Affairs Committee isn't looking into whether the Prime Minister misled the House.
Neither are the police.
Neither are the police. There is no process other than the one which the Speaker has allowed to be addressed today, and that is to refer the issue of whether the Prime Minister has misled this House should be determined by the Privileges Committee. And if the honourable gentleman is going to be consistent, he should agree with that and he should vote for it today.
Yeah. I think the honourable he should understand that the only reason we're here today is because of things that are being determined either through the release of papers for the humble address or evidence people are given to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. And that's why we're here. So for him to say that those processes have no relevance in this process is absolutely wrong. That they absolutely have full relevance. And my whole case is that we should have let those processes complete their entire run before, and that's why I believe this is premature. I'll come back in a bit. I want to make a bit of progress. So it is right and proper that all allegations should be examined thoroughly and those processes should run their course. And whilst that is all going on, I would suggest this privilege motion is premature. More than that, it's a clear attempt to bypass the processes already taking place, as I've just said. Mr. Speaker, whatever one's views of the substantive issues, there are some things that we should all agree on, and that is that the Prime Minister has been forthcoming in addressing the allegations, both in this House and outside. The Prime Minister has apologised from the very outset for the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson in this House and outside, and apologies that have been full, wholesome and without equivocation. He has also specifically apologised to the victims of Epstein. The Prime Minister has repeatedly answered questions in this House and outside and shown a willingness to be held accountable.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for giving way. Whatever the merits of this motion, does he accept that the party whip should not be exercised where politicians are constrained and cannot support or go against a particular motion? Does he agree that that whip should be withdrawn?
It's fine.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a humble backbencher, and I would not disagree with my chief whip in terms of their decisions on how to apply the whip. That's a matter for them. The inquiries, all those inquiries I've talked about, are ongoing and they are being robustly pursued. Mr. Speaker, I fear therefore that this motion risks setting an unhealthy precedent. That unproven allegations alone are sufficient to utilise the most serious, one of Parliament's most serious procedures. And this is not something any of us should be comfortable with. The naked politicising of this process will not serve Parliament well. My fear, Mr. Speaker, my further fear, Mr. Speaker, is that whilst people on the opposition benches are seeking to utilise this procedure in this way, some of those honourable members on the opposition benches will already be looking to see what other procedures they can use to further extend this process. in this partisan way. Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent on all of us to give consideration to due process and proportionality. Diverting away from the high standards voters expect of this House risks damaging confidence in Parliament itself. There are substantial parliamentary and other processes already underway. We should not preempt those processes, which is what this has the potential to do, but should allow them to complete their procedures. That is in the best interest of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. It's in the best interest of transparency, due process and proportionality, and that's why I call on members to vote against this motion.
Sir David Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes the wisdom of the House is crystallised in the comments of us ordinary backbenchers, and particularly today with the brave speech of the Honourable Lady for and indeed with the intervention of the Honourable Member for Perry Barr on the Leader of the Opposition. Both of them, in effect, said that what we have lived through in these last several months is a tragedy, not just for this House, not just for the government, not just for the Labour Party, but for the trust in government, the trust in our democracy of ordinary people. Now, at the risk of expulsion from my own party, I will admit to having hoped after the election that the Prime Minister would succeed, because it's in the interest of the country that he did. But in some ways, even more importantly, it's in the interest of our democracy that he did, because there is already extant throughout the entire Western world a corrosion of belief in democracy, on and on and on. This will make it worse. Now, we're here today for a simple reason. Statements by the Prime Minister made in this chamber are at odds with those provided by the Civil Service on the material issue of Peter Mandelson. This matters. It's not a stunt, it matters. Yep. Honesty between ministers and Parliament is fundamental to our democracy. Without it, scrutiny fails. Without it, accountability fails. Without it, trust fails. The responsibility for absolute honesty rests most heavily on the Prime Minister. So the standard that should be met by the Prime Minister is even higher than for others. Recklessness with the truth for any minister is unacceptable. From the Prime Minister, it's indefensible. Now, all political parties have their inherent flaws, and I'm not going to spend a whole day talking about mine. But the origins of this situation, the origins of this situation lie in a stance often taken by Labour MPs, which is that good intentions somehow justify bad decisions. We mean well, so our mistakes don't matter. Worse, we mean well, so we should be forgiven for everything, whether it's freebies or wrong appointments or whatever. That mindset, which I'm afraid is sort of sanctimonious arrogance, sustained by a habit of believing their own propaganda, is precisely what led to the appointment of a deeply unsuitable individual as our ambassador to Washington. A man twice dismissed after scandal. A man under formal investigation now by the EU's anti-fraud office. A man with an extraordinary relationship with a convicted paedophile. A man driven above all by a pursuit of glamour, money and status. A man who turned amorality into an art form. And in addition to that, a man who has plainly compromised by an over-close relationship with the proxies of both the Russian and the Chinese government. Together, these facts should have made this appointment unthinkable. Yet these concerns were brushed aside. The head of the diplomatic service, we heard this morning in the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, was not even consulted. Why? Because within the London establishment, a ludicrous self-deception had taken hold. That the peculiarities of the Trump administration could be countered to the peculiarities of Peter Mandelson. Yes, of course.
Grateful to my right honourable friend. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that almost universally the previous ambassador, Dame Karen Pierce, was widely respected and felt to have a good relationship with the previous Trump administration? There was no reason to believe she wouldn't have one with the current Trump administration.
Well, that's entirely true. And in fact, the current Trump administration made that point to the government before the nomination of Peter Mandelson. So that perverse logic led to the most obviously unwise public appointment in modern times. And the implied message, unfortunately, was clear. Government appointments rest on networks of patronage.
Yeah.
Great offices of state are perks to be handed out to friends.
Yeah.
And it's systemic. They even tried to get an ambassadorial appointment for Lord Doyle, a man so unsuitable he's even had their whip withdrawn.
Yep.
Mandelson's unsuitability was evident before vetting began. It would have been surprising had the vetting service not found grounds to reject the appointment. I suspect Number 10 knew that, and they leaned on the Foreign Office to ensure the outcome was secured quickly and without question. And by the way, one of the honourable members, I can't remember his name or seat, tried to suggest that pressure for time is different from pressure on outcome. When it's vetting, it's not. I mean, my first positive vetting took 6 months. Now, I know I've got an unreliable friend, but fewer, I think, than Lord Mandelson. It would have taken quite a long time to get to the bottom of all the issues raised at Lord Mandelson. So saying you've got to do it quickly is the same as you've got to do it shoddily. So let's not lose sight of that. I'll give way.
Oh, Francois.
He's making an excellent speech. But is it not true that the post of UK ambassador to Washington would be held by someone who would therefore have access to extremely sensitive intelligence, potentially including nuclear cooperation, and the fact that Mandelson had been found to have been working for a Russian company post the invasion of Ukraine should have completely barred him from that appointment on that one ground alone?
My honourable friend is exactly right, and indeed it's worse than that, because it is the nexus, that post is the nexus of the entire Five Eyes intelligence cooperation. And in our service, it's not like the Americans. In the American embassies, the CIA is freestanding. The ambassador doesn't matter. In our service, the ambassador runs the local Secret Service element, if you like. And so he is or she is entirely responsible, has entire access. And it's particularly an issue with the Americans, because the Americans are incredibly sensitive about the corruption or in any way undermining the security of that arrangement. So we could actually put at risk the whole Five Eyes cooperation arrangement, but the honourable friend leaves me off on a completely different tangent. So when asked this morning, to come back to the general point, when asked this morning about delay and attitude and pressure, so when asked this morning at the Foreign Affairs Select Committee if he recalled any dismissiveness in Number 10 about the importance of Mandelson's vetting, Sir Philip Barton, that's Ollie Robbins' predecessor, described Number 10 as uninterested in his security clearance. The evidence Sir Ollie Robbins gave was that throughout January there was constant pressure and an atmosphere of constant chasing. Yesterday, Ian Collard, the former head of the Foreign Office security team, corroborated Sir Ollie Robbins' account. And just this morning, again, Sir Philip Barton repeatedly emphasised there was pressure to secure Mandelson's vetting clearance within, I quote, a very compressed timescale. And the Prime Minister told this House only a week ago, no pressure existed whatsoever. Now, if that was the only issue, that would justify being referred to the Privileged Committee to resolve what the exact truth was. But it wasn't. Because plainly there, if the Foreign Office is right, the Prime Minister is wrong, and on that timetable, actually deliberately wrong. But let's take some other occasions. On the 4th of February of this year, the Prime Minister gave an unambiguous impression when asked about Epstein's coverage in the security clearance that he'd seen Peter Mandelson's security vetting. But in April, he told the House, on the 14th of April, he found out for the first time that Mandelson had been granted developed vetting clearance against the specific recommendation of the United Kingdom security vetting, that developed vetting clearance should be denied. These two statements are incompatible. Again, a freestanding failure of the rules. And more, this chaotic clash of opinions reinforces the impression that far from following due process, as the Prime Minister has maintained on a number of occasions, Number 10 was effectively making it up as it went along.
Yeah.
On the 11th of November 2024, the then Cabinet Secretary Simon Case, as we've heard already from the Leader of the Opposition, issued explicit advice: secure the necessary security clearances before confirming your choice. Again, this was reinforced this morning by Sir Philip Barton, who described the correct process as, quote, the normal order is vetting and then announcement. Normal due process was clear, but the Prime Minister did the opposite. Yep. Claims that this was normal defy common sense. For career ambassadors, the DV, the direct vetting, happens at every new post. You go to become an ambassador in Tehran, you're DV'd. You go to become an ambassador in Washington, you're DV'd again. But the DV is an update, so it's lower risk, and by definition, our ambassadors, generally speaking, are low-risk security personnel anyway. This is plainly not the case for a high-risk figure like Peter Mandelson. Indeed, frankly, it's harder to imagine a higher-risk appointment to a post, as my honourable friend, said, is of the utmost sensitivity. To appoint first and vet later is not due process. It's certainly not prudent. It's a gamble with national security and a risk for our single most important alliance. So there are three instances where the Prime Minister made questionable statements. His insistence that there was no pressure when there evidently was, the two versions he gave on when he saw the vetting file, and the assertion that due process was followed when it clearly was at odds with the process described by both the Cabinet Secretary and the Permanent Secretary for the Foreign Office. So the Prime Minister made a deeply questionable decision. Whether it was cronyism, a misunderstanding of the role, or excessive leniency towards a member of his own party, something he would never have tolerated, quite rightly, from any other party, we cannot know for certain. Whatever the explanation, the conclusion is unavoidable. The decision was wrong. And to implement it, established procedures were bent out of shape. The civil service was placed under extreme pressure to deliver outcomes that sat on the margins of propriety. When concerns were raised, they were not confronted but sidestepped. As usual in number 10, an attempt was made to place the blame on somebody else. Even in this week's New Statesman, traditionally a banner carrier for the Prime Minister, even in this week's New Statesman, I think it was Tom McCabe's article, there is a quote from a senior government official who goes on at length against the Prime Minister, but he ends by saying, ask Chris, ask Sue, ask Morgan, ask Ollie. He will say he takes responsibility, but then he makes everyone else pay. That's what we're looking at. So rather than addressing concerns directly, the Prime Minister proceeded regardless, and only later sought to justify his decision with answers that were, I'm afraid, frequently misleading. As a former DPP, he should have known better. What began as a mistake evolved into something more serious. A failure turned into a defence, a problem became a pattern, and ultimately the situation now looks like a cover-up. But today, as we've already heard from the front bench and a number of other speakers, is not about determining guilt, it's about determining whether there is a case to answer. Finding the truth and adjudicating guilt is the task of the Committee of Privileges, which has both the time and the access required to examine the evidence in full. Now, much has been made of Boris Johnson's appearance, as it were, before the Privileges Committee, and I am famously a fan of Boris Johnson. When it was brought to this House, that question, whether it should go, it was clearly recognised at the time that this was not delivering a verdict, but was deciding whether there was a case to be answered. Now, I, at the time, with our own Whip's office, made it very plain that I would not countenance any attempt to block a proper investigation on a House of Commons matter. But I was by no means alone. There are a number of other colleagues who made the same argument. And as a result, the government of the day accepted this is a House of Commons matter.
Exactly.
It is improper for for the government to intervene in such a matter to try to guide the House. Accordingly, the motion passed without a whip and without division. Interestingly, the honourable gentleman thought. Mr. Speaker, you know, in a debate which is about misleading the House, I do wonder when members of this House accuse others of not voting in a measure without a vote. So I will not be taking intervention from him. I will certainly not be taking intervention from him. As the honourable gentleman is a noisemaker, not a truth-issuer. On the evidence before us today, contradictions, procedural failures and an emerging pattern of conduct, there is plainly a case for referral. Where doubt exists, it should be resolved through proper scrutiny. Where a case exists, it should be tested. This case should go to the Committee of Privileges and go today.
Cole Turner.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the Right Honourable Gentleman for Goole and Pocklington. We rarely agree politically, him and I, but we do work together, I think, constructively in the constituency for the betterment of the region. Mr. Speaker, I start by way of an apology, because I think it was mentioned by the Leader of the Opposition. I did accidentally publish correspondence between me and you, Mr. Speaker, last week. That was my mistake. I respect you, Mr. Speaker, and I respect your office. So I apologise sincerely for that mistake. But it was my mistake. Now, do I believe that the Prime Minister deliberately misled this House? No, frankly. I've known him a long time. I know him, I think, very well. I think it's fair to say I describe him as a friend, and I think he's described me as a friend as well. Both him and I are lawyers by trade. There is no way, in my honest opinion, that the Prime Minister would come to this House and deliberately mislead the House. However, there was a very significant difference, in my view, between what the Prime Minister said in answer to the Right Honourable Lady, the Leader of the Opposition, last week in Prime Minister's questions, and what the evidence was of Ollie Robbins the previous day. I think I'm right in saying that the Prime Minister said there was no pressure whatsoever, intimating at very least that that was the evidence that Ollie Robbins had given to the committee. I watched every minute of it. That's definitely not, and I've looked back, I've checked Hansard, the evidence that was given by Ollie Robbins. So I do think there is a prima facie case for this matter to be investigated and an inquiry to be had by the appropriate committee of this House. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that if that happened, I suspect it's not going to, because this is whipped, and I don't blame the government for that. I find it unfortunate, to be honest, but they're not setting any new precedent. There's been precedent for whip scenarios in this situation in the past. But, Mr. Speaker, I do think the Prime Minister would be vindicated. Yes.
For giving way. He is right that there are some precedents for House business being whipped, but the lesson learnt from that is that it is a fool's errand. It is normally the start of the end. So does he agree that whilst he is making a fair point to his front bench and being kind to them, that the lesson is there may be precedent, but you learn from precedent, you don't repeat it?
Very grateful to the Honourable Lady. She's spot on, and it leads me to the point that was raised by the Leader of the Opposition. I did make a statement on social media that this was a stunt. I think a stunt is defined as an action designed to capture attention. I think it's worse than that, actually, if I want to be cynical. I think the problem is this. This is an action designed to capture Labour MPs. And that's my concern. Because if it is said by our opponents politically that Labour MPs came in here today to block an inquiry of this House of the leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister. I think every single one of us will be accused by our electorate of trying to help the Prime Minister in a situation where he needed to face the music. Mr. Speaker, I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. The Prime Minister has set out a very detailed chronology, and he's made it abundantly clear that he has not lied, he has not misled this House. So in those circumstances, would it not be the right thing to do to embrace this process and wipe the floor with the critics that put those things to him? And whilst we're at it, would he also agree with me that the appointment of Peter Mandelson, who had made it abundantly clear that his purpose every day was to take action to bring down the then duly elected of the Labour Party, made him wholly and utterly unsuitable for that office?
Well, I was about to say he's a good man, and he used to be my boss, Mr. Speaker, in the shadow transport team. He always tries to help me. But I don't want to get into the stuff in relation to Mandelson, which he hopes I go down. But while I'm speaking about the appointment of Mandelson, I'll say this, right? I think the Prime Minister appointed Mandelson in the national interest. I think he thought that we would go to Washington and do a job in the national interest and deliver for the country. I think that's why he made the appointment of him. And I think when it became clear, following the Bloomberg emails, that it was politically difficult for the government, the Prime Minister again did the right thing by dismissing him, very probably. But where I think the Prime Minister went wrong is by the shenanigans between that point and that point, looking round for an excuse of why it's gone wrong. Just take it on the chin. Deal with it. That is the advice I would have been giving the Prime Minister, and that's why I am particularly disappointed, because the truth of the matter is, and people, colleagues who came in at the last general election might be disappointed with me because I've got the audacity to stand up and say what I'm to believe is the truth. I'm sorry if they're not happy with me about that, but I'm here not to represent my interests, but to represent the interests of those that elect me to this chamber. And that's what I will always do, whether it's against the government policy, whether it's a Tory party in government, or whether it's my own government. I'll do what I think is in the interests of my electorate. And let me just warn colleagues by saying this. I promise you now, if we are seen to go through the lobby to defend this process, which is a reasonable process, Mr. Speaker, this isn't the shenanigans that the government has suggested in relation to jury trials. This is not a single judge. This is a jury of peers, impartial, made up more of Labour MPs than it is Tory MPs. The Prime Minister has nothing to fear. He ought to do the right thing. He should, as my honourable friend suggested, he should have referred himself. And that would have saved us all this messing around, debating the point, trying to justify why it's a bad idea. There's two committees running alongside. Utter nonsense. Get on with it, be dealt with, and let's move on, because we'll not move on from this shenanigans. I'll give way.
John Baddoll. I think the honourable gentleman was referring to me when he said that I recommended the Prime Minister refer himself to it. And the reason I did that is because when you're under attack like this, you don't run from the attack. You run to face it. And you run to face it with confidence. And you argue if there's an attack and people want to criticise the individual, then produce the evidence. And he knows as well as I do that the Privilege Committee will deal with this matter fairly, and I believe as a result of that will this party will come out of it stronger.
Completely agree with my right honourable friend. I think I said on Twitter, he rarely gets it wrong. I was accused of being wrong for suggesting the very thing that he rarely gets wrong. But I think, in my experience of knowing him for the time that I've known him, he rarely, in my opinion, gets it wrong. So I think he's absolutely spot on. I'm confident, I'm convinced. I know the Prime Minister, I know he's not a liar. I know he wouldn't deliberately mislead. I know that for a fact. And I think he would be exonerated. And I think the trouble we now face is the accusations from the electorate that we stopped it happening in the first place. And for that reason, the Prime Minister is guilty by the fact that we avoided the inquiry in the first place. And once we're in that position, once we are in that position, we have a big problem. Because you cannot prove something that never happened. Thank you.
Father House, Edward Lee.
I want to speak very briefly, Mr. Speaker, because I'm not particularly party political and I don't like making personal attacks, and I'm not calling for the Prime Minister to resign. I'm not questioning the appointment of Mr. Mansell. This debate is not about whether that was a good decision. I'm sure that at the time there was some logic in appointing him, in that obviously the incoming president was a very political, very difficult character, and it was felt that Mansell had the political skills to deal with him. I understand all that. So I'm not making a big issue about Mr. Mandelson or about whether it was right to appoint him or not. And I wasn't really going to speak in this debate until I heard the speech from the Honourable Lady for South Shields, which I think was a very powerful speech, because it came from somebody who was obviously a loyal member of the Labour Party, as is the member for Hull East who's just spoken, that they were not trying to damage their own government. All they were, I think, trying to say is that when you have an issue like this, when all sorts of allegations are being thrown across the floor of the House about whether people lied or not, actually having a process with the Privileges Committee is a process of catharsis. And we saw that with Boris Johnson. There was deep upset in the country, we know that. Whether that was fair or not, whether Mr. Johnson acted wrongly or not, we know that there was deep upset about what was going on with Partygate. But it was right that the House decided to have that Privileges Committee, and we knew that in a way that drew a line under the whole thing. Now, I believe the Prime Minister. I'm sure he's an honourable person. It's not for me to say that he deliberately misled the House. But I think there are many questions that quite reasonable people are asking. And one of the most reasonable questions was actually put by my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition. If due process was followed, why was a dedicated civil servant, Sir Ollie Robbins, sacked for not following, apparently, due process? And I think many reasonable people feel that what is really monstrously unfair about this is that civil servants, dedicated civil servants, were simply trying to carry out the wishes of their political masters. And Sir Ollie Robbins has paid a very great price. And I think many people in the civil service, our civil service is incredibly loyal to ministers. They work loyally for ministers. They try and carry out the wishes of their ministers. And I think that many reasonable people feel that the treatment of Sir Ollie Robbins has been quite wrong and he should be reinstated. But that's, in a way, for another day. You know, I think the my honourable friend for Lagan Valley put it so well. If there's nothing to hide, why worry? You know, in these scandals, it's such a war of words, we almost lose track of what was originally true. It's not the original scandal, if there is indeed a scandal, which is at fault. It's the cover-up, or the perceived cover-up. And the best way to restore public trust in Parliament, in the system, in what the Prime Minister said or didn't say, and the public are not that interested in all the details of all this, and they're probably, like me, quite confused about actually whether the process was followed, who said what, whether the Chief of Staff bullied the head of the Foreign Office. These are all just party political words, Westminster bubble. What's important is the reputation of this place. And the most important thing in this place, we may say wrong things, we may say silly things, we may be party political, we've got to tell the truth. That's all that matters. Nothing else matters in this Parliament. I am prepared to accept that the Prime Minister, for whatever reason, made this appointment. I'm prepared to accept that in his heart of hearts, when he's been standing at that dispatch box, he's been telling the truth. Why can't we just have a privileged committee, not the Foreign Affairs Committee, which is deciding great issues of foreign affairs, just a privileged committee to look at this narrow issue? Why can we not just not have a vote at all? Not have a vote at all, like the last occasion with Boris Johnson. Just don't have a vote. Let us all express our point of view and let it go through. Let us have an impartial committee. Let us listen to the testimony and let the committee and the House of Commons make up its own mind on the truth.
Nadia Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, it's important that in all of this we're centring Epstein's victims, who have so often been forgotten. Their courageous campaign for justice and accountability continues, and we must all do all that we can to support it. I've heard the argument that this is all a distraction from the real issues that we should be discussing. Now, I would like nothing more than for us to be focusing on what this government has delivered, like bringing NHS waiting lists down, raising the minimum wage and lifting children out of poverty, and pushing for even greater ambition. But unfortunately, it's because of the serious mistakes made by Number 10, like appointing Peter Mandelson, that these achievements are being overshadowed. Now, I also don't doubt that the Conservatives are attempting to use this issue for their own gain ahead of the local elections. As my honourable friend said, that is politics. Of course, our political opponents will try to exploit our weaknesses. But nevertheless, I believe that our constituents do care about the honesty of politicians and that they deserve nothing less than the whole truth on this matter. This vote is not on whether we in this House believe that the Prime Minister misled Parliament or not, but about whether we believe that there are questions that the Prime Minister needs to answer and that the Privileges Committee should look at the matter and give its assessments. I appreciate that the Foreign Affairs Select Committee inquiry is ongoing, and I'd like to commend its chair for the fantastic work that she is doing. But the purpose of that inquiry is not to look at the Prime Minister's conduct. I've listened to the Prime Minister's arguments, and unfortunately I am yet to be convinced that he has definitively not misled the House, even if inadvertently. Because I'm concerned that pressure was put on the Foreign Office regarding Mandelson's appointment, given Sir Ollie Robbins' evidence. And if I remain unconvinced, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure there'll be a sizable number of our constituents who are also unconvinced. Why not let the Privileges Committee settle this matter once and for all? As is often said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. If we're to preserve what little trust still remains in our political system, it is vital that ministers demonstrate the utmost transparency, and it is vital that we, as MPs, no matter our political allegiance, do not allow the impression that we are in any way attempting to cover things up for the leadership of our parties. And that is why I'm extremely disappointed that Labour MPs are being whipped to oppose this motion. Votes on House business are not normally whipped, and even Boris Johnson's government did not whip Conservative MPs to oppose his referral to the Privileges Committee. I'm not making any comparison between his behaviour and that of the Prime Minister's, but our government must be seen to be holding itself to far higher standards than the mess and the sleaze and corruption that Johnson's government came to represent. I wish that the Prime Minister would just refer himself to the Privileges Committee, demonstrating his confidence that he has nothing to hide and preventing the need for a vote entirely. Now, colleagues will be aware that the Prime Minister and I have had our political differences, which is to be expected in a broad church party, but I want to be clear that that has absolutely no bearing on my vote today. I'd rather stick to debating these politics, not matters of integrity. So it brings me no pleasure to vote for the motion today. But this is about doing what is right by our constituents, for trust in politics, and for the party that I've been a member of for almost half my life.
Simon Hall.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And there's been a common theme in the remarks made by the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Kingston upon Hull East. The Honourable Lady who's just spoken, it's a pleasure to follow, from Nottingham East, and the Honourable Lady for South Shields. I don't really know what wings of the Labour Party or bit of the Labour complexion they represent, but what I do know of the three of them is that they are Labour people and part of the Labour family to their very fingertips. And I think the difficulty and the emotional difficulty which they felt in giving those three very powerful speeches was certainly tangible on this side of the House, and I hope their right honourable and honourable friends on their side of the House felt it too. Because I know, as my right honourable friend, the member for Goole and Pocklington mentioned, as have one or two others, one of the hardest things to do in this place is when your instincts and your judgment are to go against the herd of what your family or what the whip is telling you to do. Politics is a tribal thing. We stand together or we hang together, so we're told. But it was Lord Nolan, in those principles that he set out some years ago, who reminded us all that the exercise of our judgment as individual members of Parliament is so important. It was depressing to hear the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Smethwick, say, slightly tongue-in-cheek, I'm just a humble backbencher. It's not for me to say what the whipping should be. We are all individual members capable of coming to our own rational judgment, informed by all sorts of imperatives. And I would just remind the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, that one or two members opposite have prayed in aid, as a reason why this motion shouldn't be carried, the humble address. But I would just remind colleagues across the House, but particularly colleagues opposite, that we started that debate on the humble address with the whip being to vote it down from the government side. It was only when the government chief whip and the leader of the House, two right honourable gentlemen with whom I have the highest esteem and regard, listened to the debate, when the right honourable gentleman, the member for Torvine, as the Paymaster General, read the mood of not the House, but their own benches, and realised that the whip was wrong, and they needed to find a way of meeting something in the middle. Now, all of this could go away, of course, were the Prime Minister to refer himself. Now, the honourable... I will be fine.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend and I could never have been described as the greatest fans of Boris Johnson. But this party decided that when it came forward to go to the Privilege Committee, that committee was the right place to decide whether he had misled Parliament. Nobody was calling for his resignation until that report came out. Now, after that report, this party moved and he went. Now, isn't the flip side of the coin, I say to my honourable friend, that once the Privilege Committee, as many Labour MPs believe, will clear the Prime Minister, that actually his strength will grow. Is it not true, Madam Deputy Speaker, that he has nothing to fear?
My right honourable friend has many skills, one of which I've just learned is that he is able to read the left-handed scrawl of my hand on my notes, even when he's sitting next to me, because that is a point I am literally just about to come to, because the Honourable Lady for South Shields wondered, as have one or two, is this a trap set by my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, and many on these opposition benches laying this motion? I don't think it is. But even if it were, which I do not believe it is, as I say, the whipping operation from the government benches today has baited that trap. It is the wrong thing to do. It makes, as my right honourable friend suggests, the Prime Minister look uncertain. It makes the Prime Minister look weak. He's not using a large parliamentary majority in this place to deliver change for the country, but turning you all into a human shield for him. And I agree with the right honourable member for Hull East. I think the Prime Minister takes his training and experience as a lawyer very seriously. I think the Prime Minister takes the integrity of politics very seriously. I sometimes think the Prime Minister can be naive in presuming that everybody else takes a sort of similar, sort of elevated view of these things, and I think that can sometimes be really feeding in to some of his problems. So one has to ask, what would the Prime Minister, who is an experienced lawyer, fear from having his name cleared and his reputation strengthened by going through a cross-party informal process of this House? He wouldn't. He would feel stronger. But we do understand that Labour whips and loyal ministers have been picking up the telephones or whatever, accidentally on purpose, bumping into people in the lobby or elsewhere, asking them to vote this motion down. May I give, for what it's worth, just some thoughts on how I would have responded were a whip on my side to have asked me to do the same.
Keep it clean. Keep it clean.
And don't worry, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have checked what is parliamentary language and what is not. The first point I would make is one which has already been made. Not even Boris Johnson. I was never a fan. We first met in the late 1990s. I never got him then, he never got me, and nothing ever changed. But not even Boris Johnson thought to apply a whip on a privileges motion. So the question I would be asking if I was the honourable gentleman, the member for Smethwick, or anybody else to the whips is, do we, as Labour, really want to be letting him look like the good guy when it comes to referrals to the Privileges Committee? Bad politics, as far as the Labour Party is concerned. The second point I would make is that the Privileges Committee can be the fulcrum for lancing this particular boil. It will do it dispassionately, it will do it well, it will do it without fear or favour. That is what the Privileges Committee is taught to do. They have done it in the past, they could do it now. I am doubtless that they will do it in the future. There is nothing to be afraid of. This is not a kangaroo court. This is not a committee comprised just of people who really can't stand the Prime Minister. It is a committee of this House. I will.
My honourable friend is making an excellent speech as usual. He's talking about the composition of the Privileges Committee. Is it right to say that that is actually comprised of the majority of Labour members? He's actually asking his own colleagues, amongst others, to judge on him.
My honourable friend is right. Just in the way, of course, that when the Privileges Committee looked at Boris Johnson's behaviour, there was a majority of Tory MPs on it. And it was still able to come to a judgment on the facts, on the evidence. Would you forgive me if I don't? I know a lot of members want to speak, and I just want to make a little bit of progress. The third thing, the third compelling reason that Labour whip or Labour minister has deployed, well, The local elections. Wales. Scotland.
National elections.
This isn't going to do us any good at all. Well, I'll tell you what would give a whole lot more confidence to party canvassers, I would suggest, if this was raised on the doorstep. My leader has nothing to fear. He has referred himself, or has not sought to hinder, a motion that referred him to the Privileges Committee. If members opposite, honourable and right honourable, follow the advice, and that might be the gentlest way of describing it, but follow the advice of government whips today, they will be creating the largest albatross to hang around their necks in these closing days as we approach polling day. Why did you vote to cover up for the Prime Minister? Why did you not do the right thing? What has the Prime Minister got to hide? Why is the Prime Minister running scared? Far much better to say to that floating voter, or that person who may be havering over where to put their cross, what confidence has my party leader got, the Prime Minister? He's happy for this to happen. He's absolutely clear in his own mind that his integrity is unimpeachable, his honesty is to be unquestioned, he has not misled the House. Off to the races. It is another trap which the Labour Party seems to be keen to fall into. We're all familiar, I would be saying to that whip, that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let the Privilege Committee be that sunlight. And I can well remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I say in closing, there was a vote in the last Parliament which was whipped, and 13 of us on the government benches rebelled. It was a hard and tricky vote. We came under pressure during it and most certainly after it. But within 24 hours, the position of the government had changed to find itself pointing in the direction of those of us who had rebelled rather than those who had been loyal. This may sound a slightly old-fashioned question to ask ourselves. When we leave this place, either by our own choice or the choice of our electorate, we would all want to, I think, sit back and say, when some of those crunch votes came, did we do the right and honourable thing? Did we do something which left my soul and spirit feeling peaceful or in a state of turmoil? But possibly more importantly for today and tomorrow, could we, without blushing or without crossing our fingers or without trying to find some weasel word, answer truthfully why anybody would vote against this motion if we were asked it in the supermarket queue this weekend, or at the butcher's or the fishmonger's or wherever? Because if there is nothing to hide, let that absence of something to hide be shown to the Privileges Committee. The Prime Minister will be strengthened, the integrity of this place enhanced, the honesty of politics burnished. It is the right thing to do. In their hearts, they know it's the right thing to do. Have the courage of the Honourable Gentleman, the Member for Hull East, the Honourable Lady for Nottingham East, the Honourable Lady for South Shields. You will be in jolly good company.
Tim Rocker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The appointment of Mandelson was a profoundly flawed process. It was also a profoundly flawed choice. It was the wrong choice. And I think of the victims of Epstein, and I also think of Alistair Darling, who was a fine public servant, a committed public servant, and what he would be thinking today. But we're asked this afternoon to make several leaps of faith, one of which is to believe that just 9 days from local and national elections that we are here, not because of a political stunt coordinated by the Conservative Party, but to accept that they have turned into a sober, principled set of defenders of parliamentary standards. That they are not interested in pre-election theatre, but Nobody seriously believes that. Even their own press briefings give the game away. A senior Conservative source was reported as saying, "We got the privileges vote. That was the goal ahead of the local elections." Not the truth, not the outcome, not the merits of the case. The goal was simply to force the spectacle of a vote. And that tells us everything we need to know about the intent behind what is happening this afternoon. And it's no surprise, then, that this has been widely characterised, even by those observing closely political correspondence, as a win-win exercise for the opposition. If they secure an inquiry, they claim vindication. If they lose, they still bank the headlines, the insinuation, the noise. This is not how the House should conduct itself when invoking one of the most serious mechanisms at its disposal. And as the Honourable Member for Smethwick very powerfully pointed out, we're not dealing with a vacuum. There are mechanisms already in train. The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, the humble address. The Prime Minister answered questions for nearly 3 hours last week. That is important. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, referral to the Privileges Committee is not a partisan tool. It is not a device to be deployed because one side sees a political opportunity. It exists for a clear, prima facie, serious and evidenced case of misleading the House, cases that go to the heart of ministerial integrity. Very happy to give way to the Honourable Member. Because it's so evident that what you're doing this afternoon, that the Honourable Member is participating this afternoon, is party political. In fact, I would say to the Honourable Member that he's partaking in a particularly dishonourable act in doing this in such a partisan way. So, to carry on with the case that I was making, I do not believe that what has been presented meets the bar that I just mentioned. At most, what we are dealing with now, I'm going to make some progress, thank you. At most, what we are dealing with here is an argument about a deeply flawed appointment, as I've said, a deeply flawed process and the judgments around it. But those are matters for political debate, for scrutiny, for challenge, across this chamber, but they are not, in themselves, grounds for alleging contempt of Parliament. If they were, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Privileges Committee would be constantly in session. And that brings me to the question of consistency, because the House in recent years has had to confront genuinely serious breaches, cases where standards weren't just questioned but plainly and repeatedly violated. Findings of bullying at the highest levels of government in the last government, of ministers in the last government falling short of the standards expected of them. And most notably, we saw a former Conservative Prime Minister investigated and found to repeatedly have misled the House. Conduct so grave, I'll finish this point and then I might give way if I'm feeling generous. Conduct so grave that it resulted in a damning report, which I think the Leader of the Opposition abstained on voting in favour of, I think. And, of course, that's quite aside from the fact that it also involved a criminal conviction.
Exactly.
There is no equivalence, none. Between those cases and what is before us today. Because if there was, there would have been a genuine attempt at a cross-party piece of persuasion. And instead what we got from the Leader of the Opposition was a rambling rollercoaster. Iran, the two-child benefits cap, U-turns, etc. So, to attempt to draw that comparison is not just wrong, it diminishes the seriousness of those findings in the past. It risks turning the Privileges Committee from a guardian of standards into a weapon of convenience. Madam Deputy Speaker, the motion today speaks the language of contempt of Parliament, but actually it reveals something else. It reveals the contempt the opposition hold for the British people.
Keep the temperament good. Stephen Flynn.
Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman from Macclesfield who's done himself no harm whatsoever and soon becoming a junior whip in the government. And I look forward to seeing him in his trade envoy, of course.
America, an ambassador.
I'll let them have their fun soon, Madam Deputy Speaker. But I wish to start on a much more important note, which is not to dwell upon what the Prime Minister said, where he is, of course, accused of misleading the House. I will come to that. It's something that he said at the dispatch box a few months beforehand, when he stood up just there and in response to the Leader of the Opposition said that he knew that Peter Mandelson had maintained a relationship with the world's most notorious paedophile and child trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein. And when he stood up at that dispatch box and said he knew, he finally admitted that he knew. That should have been it. That should have been curtains for him. And the members opposite at that time, at that moment, should have made a moral decision that he was not fit to hold the office of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the First Lord of the Treasury. He was not fit because his judgment was flawed and it was wrong. But they proactively chose to ignore that and to defend him. And in the weeks that have passed, all we have seen is even greater scandal engulf this Prime Minister and the members opposite, whether they realise it or not. Some appear not to. And as Parliament returns after the prorogation which is to come, we've now received confirmation from the Prime Minister's chief bag carrier that the second tranche of the Mandelson files will become apparent. And each and every one of these members opposite will be wedded to him as their leader and their Prime Minister, despite everything that the public knows and everything that the public is going to come to learn. And let me tell them something. As someone who has sat in this House and watched a little bit of chaos up close, it will come back to haunt them, and it will come back to bite them far sooner than they realise. And all of us, in all of our political parties, go through these moments. I've seen it in my own party in recent years, just as members opposite have said they have seen it in theirs. But what you do in politics, or what you should seek to do, is learn from those mistakes, not to repeat them. I remember sitting outside this chamber during a very contentious vote to which the right honourable member behind me referred earlier, where Conservative members were whipped to support the indefensible, and all chaos broke loose. That was the legacy that they built for themselves, and it's why they got hammered at the last election. This is what is going to befall the members opposite. They cannot outrun Peter Mandelson. They cannot outrun their own Prime Minister and his record. And what the House is being asked to do today is, of course, very simple. If they believe that the Prime Minister is innocent of the accusations that are being put to him, then all they need to do is accept the premise of taking it to a committee of the peers in this House, ourselves, to decide whether that is accurate or not. A confident Prime Minister, a confident Labour Party, a confident government would believe their Prime Minister, would have courage in their conviction and go to that committee post-haste to clear his name. But they will not do that because they are not acting from a position of strength. They are acting from a position of profound weakness. And the public see that, and the public smell it. And all they are going to believe is that there is a cover-up on behalf of each and every one of the members opposite who traipses through the lobby behind this front bench. Of course I will.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Referring to the whiff that the public may pick up, do you think that some of the Prime Minister's concern may be that the Privilege Committee delivers a result that he may not like? Oh.
It's hard at this stage to come to any other conclusion. And if they had confidence in their Prime Minister, then they would already be going to the Privileges Committee, irrespective of the views of any of us in this here House. But notwithstanding the arguments that have been made regarding Ollie Robbins and Simon Case and others, and the Prime Minister's decisions to throw everyone under the bus bar himself, I do wonder what the public make of all this. At a time when they are profoundly, and I'm sure all of us can agree on this point, profoundly anxious about the very basics in their life, of being able to afford things in the supermarket, of being able to fill up the car because the price of diesel is near £2. And they turn on their TV and see a Labour Party that should be acting in their best interest, looking to protect and save their jobs, to give them hope and opportunity for the future, simply seeking to defend the indefensible. And that breach of trust, with the public can't simply be renewed. When the Prime Minister first came to that dispatch box following the general election, I did as many others did, and I congratulated him and I wished him well. And the phrase that sits most acutely in my mind at that moment was his attempt to convey to the people of these isles that he would tread lightly on their lives. He has done the opposite. He promised to be change, and I'm afraid to say he has delivered more of the same. The public deserve better. The government can do better. But that will only happen if the members who are sitting behind that front bench find the courage that the front bench so badly lacks.
Sam Rushworth.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and as others have said, I think it is important that when we speak in this place that we reflect the feelings of those that we represent. And I think that if they see anything in all of this at all, they'll be thinking about Epstein's victims. And as someone who knows more about sexual abuse than I'd like to, I want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear before I make any other remarks that I think that it was wrong to appoint Peter Mandelson, even knowing what the Prime Minister knew at the time. But I will also say this, the Prime Minister has acknowledged as much. He's acknowledged it at this dispatch box, he's acknowledged it to the PLP, and he's acknowledged it to Epstein's victims, who he has apologised to on multiple occasions. As I speak with ordinary people like an auntie that voted for Brexit and didn't vote Labour at the last election, she told me that she thinks the public are sick and tired of hearing about this because we're not addressing the bread and butter issues of their lives. Nonetheless, this is the motion before the House today. I also want to say a word about pressure. And many people have alluded to this being a whipped vote. In many ways, I wish it wasn't, because it would not change the way that I would vote. I intend to vote against the motion before us today, and I would do based on my conscience of how I read this situation. I'm a backbencher with really nothing to lose and nothing to gain greatly from loyalty to the government. I've looked at this in terms of the merits of the case. And what I think is also really important is that we do have a robust system of standards in this place and that we don't make a mockery of it. And I think when we have politically motivated charges such as been brought today, it does risk making a mockery of the Privileges Committee and that process. I will gladly give way to you.
What does he say to his colleague, the honourable member from South Shields, the member behind him, Hull East, Nottingham East? I don't see it as some politically motivated thing. This is something where it's a serious issue, it's a House issue. He already says he regrets it's whipped. Surely he needs to see beyond whatever the whips have told him.
Well, the whips haven't told me very much, but look, I will address the answer. I will address his question as I progress in my speech, and he will see why I've drawn the conclusions that I've drawn. The question is this: has the Prime Minister deliberately or recklessly misled the House sufficient to make a referral to the Privileges Committee? And as I said a moment ago, I think it's important that we treat that properly, because we should not treat lightly this committee. We should not mock it. If we just make political referrals all the time, every time a member says anything where someone could twist or misconstrue their words, we'd be making referrals. Now, it seems to me, from listening to the Leader of the Opposition, that there are two sort of principal claims. One is regarding whether due process was followed, and the other was regarding pressure. And I've been watching, and as we all have, the evidence sessions by the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've been listening carefully to those. And we're still awaiting many of the documents, more than 300, that have been referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee. And we're waiting to see what those documents say. But nothing so far that's come out has done anything other than corroborate what the Prime Minister has told us. I'll give way.
Just so I make sure that I can follow his logical structure. So when he's saying that the Prime Minister said there was no pressure existed whatever, no pressure whatever, he meant there was no pressure whatever apart from the various types of pressure. Is that right?
I will come on to address that point in just a moment. First of all, let's address the point about process. Sir Chris Wormall's letter to the Prime Minister said, "The evidence I have reviewed leads me to conclude that the appropriate processes were followed both in the appointment and withdrawal of the former HMA Washington." Sir Ollie Robbins confirmed that he did not tell the Prime Minister that Mandelson had failed the vetting process and said, "You are not supposed to share the findings and reports of UKSV other than in exceptional circumstances where doing so allows for specific mitigation of risk." So this is according to him. Kat Little, who appeared before the Foreign Affairs Committee, said, "My view is that due process was followed, because the process I've outlined to the committee is that UKSV make a recommendation and the Foreign Office make a decision as to whether to grant DV." So all the evidence so far is certainly corroborating that view. I want to address your colleague's question about pressure. Clearly, there are different types of pressure that can be exerted. And what Sir Ollie Robbins was clearly talking about was the pressure to reach a decision quickly. And we all know, they know what was going on here in the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson. We had a change in government in the United States. We had no trade deal with the United States, thanks to the legacy that they left us. We had a very difficult situation that meant that we needed a capable ambassador in post before President Trump's inauguration. And there was clearly... I'll give way.
The member is suggesting that the previous ambassador was not therefore capable.
Yeah.
It's just not what he said.
I'm happy to answer that point, and if they stop chuntering, they'll hear the answer. No, not at all. I mean, it's my personal view, although I'm not an expert in these things, that I probably would have appointed an ambassador. I said I thought the appointment of Peter Mandelson was wrong. I would have probably appointed an ambassador to the United States or left her in post. But that's immaterial to the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that Number 10 clearly felt time pressure to get somebody in post. There is a difference between feeling a pressure to conclude a process quickly and pressure exerted on somebody to change the decision. And if we listen to what Sir Ollie Robbins actually said, we will see that. I'll happily give way one more time.
And I'm genuinely listening to the honourable member's logical process as he ratiocinates through this. I might humbly say that we could do this, we could put this evidence out in a privileges committee, which would be the point of doing it. But in terms of no pressure whatsoever being exerted, and he's talking about the kinds of pressure that didn't include that were exerted, could he give examples of the kind of pressure that wasn't exerted?
We've seen no evidence, and indeed, Sir Ollie Robbins made it quite clear that he did not feel pressure to change his mind, that there was no pressure exerted on him with regards to the decision that he made. There was pressure exerted to make a decision. Now, that is just part and parcel of the normal runnings of government, particularly when you're working to a timeline. Let me quote him. I'll make some progress in a moment. "I walked into a situation where there was a strong expectation You've seen the papers released under the humble address coming from Number 10 that he needed to be in post in America as quickly as humanly possible. The very first formal communication to my predecessor from Number 10 Private Office being that they wanted this done at pace so that Mandelson could be in post before inauguration. That does not imply that there was some pressure to appoint him against the evidence that came forward. I will give way.
I thank the member for giving way. Having recognised that, as Sir Philip Barton said this morning, I don't think there can be any doubt that there was pressure to get this done as quickly as possible, i.e. to jump through all of the hoops, to confirm the decision to... No,
that's what you said.
That first bit is a quote. The next part of my sentence is my words, i.e. to jump through the hoops, to confirm an announcement that had already been made that Mandelson was appointed as ambassador. It simply stretches the bounds of reason to breaking point to suggest that pressure on time frame within the context of an already announced decision where there is no contingency plan has no impact on pressure on the content of that decision.
Message understood. Sam Rushworth.
I simply disagree. I think that pressure to get things done is part and parcel of what we do in government all the time. I'm always under pressure. I'm always under deadlines. That does not mean, and the central allegation that the Prime Minister somehow pressured them with regards to the decision, I'm sorry, the evidence has not pointed to that in any shape or form. Now I won't take any more interventions because Madam Deputy Speaker is looking at her watch. But what it simply hasn't been substantiated. There is a process going on at the moment. There are documents being released under the humble address. There is the evidence being given before the Foreign Affairs Committee. I do have to wonder why they have not waited until that process was concluded before writing to the Speaker requesting this. Now, I just want to address a couple more points quickly, and I won't take any more interventions. One is that I will acknowledge that there are members on my side today who have suggested, and indeed some members of the opposition, that they're so confident that the Prime Minister has no case to answer that he should just refer himself to the committee to prove it. I don't think that that's the way that we should be using that committee's time. I think the onus is on this place to decide has any evidence come forward yet that suggests that there is a case to answer. And I don't think anybody so far has shown any. And people have referenced as well that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, may I remind the House that at the point that he was referred to the Privileges Committee, this was not a case of what happened in the FCDO behind Prime Minister's knowledge. This was a case of him saying there were no parties in Downing Street, him then appearing photographed at parties, and then there was a Metropolitan Police investigation and a criminal conviction by the point that he was finally referred to that committee. So I'm simply not going today to indulge the opposition in their games. We all know what this is about. We all know that somewhere in Conservative headquarters right now are graphics being prepared with our faces on it to try to play some narrative to our voters that we're all part of some big cover-up. I think that when we behave like this, frankly, it does a disservice to all of us and it does a disservice to this place, and I'm simply not going to play their games today.
Well Alicia Kern.
The motion today does not attribute wrongdoing. It represents a simple choice. Do we as a House support transparency? And a decision. Do we think that truth in this place still matters? Now, Peter Mandelson's CV reads like an indictment, and we all know that, and I don't need to rehearse the litany of appalling and heinous decisions and acts that he has taken. And for me, there leaves no question as a result that the Prime Minister's judgment was absolutely found wanting in this situation. But given the seriousness of Mandelson's actions and the seriousness of this appointment, surely every member of this House wants to know why he was appointed, how he was appointed, and whether or not we and the British people have been given the full story of what happened. Now, I worked at the Foreign Office as a civil servant. And if I, listening in detail, reading every single detail bit, feel that something doesn't sit quite right, if I have former colleagues ringing me and saying that's not how the process works, it just doesn't make sense, that's not right, if we then have the Prime Minister saying that he'd seen the vetting, oh no, I meant I'd seen something else, sorry, I hadn't seen the security vetting, I'd seen the due diligence, oh there wasn't any pressure put on, well others most clearly think there was pressure put on. And if the Honourable Gentleman who just spoke is genuinely suggesting that there is no such thing as abuse from those who have more power against those who have lesser, that politicians do not sometimes behave appalling to civil services, and that pressure, oh, we're all busy, it's the same pressure. No, and that's why we have specific law. Let me finish the point and then I'll happily take this intervention. We have specific laws that represent that when someone senior to you puts you under undue pressure or treats you in a certain way, they have to take far more responsibility because they have the ability to exercise that responsibility and authority over you that you cannot challenge. And if the gentleman wants to come back and argue that he does not believe that in hierarchies, particularly number 10, political appointments versus civil servants, there is such an imbalance in power, I will happily have him make that case.
So I'm disappointed in the way that she just made that point. But no, what I saw in Sir Ollie Robbins' testimony was that he said that number 10 was repeatedly asking, has the vetting been completed? And that is inconsistent with the idea that number 10 regarded the vetting as immaterial to their decision. Quite the opposite. It demonstrates to me a number 10 that felt that actually this was an important process that had to be followed, and there was of course pressure to complete it quickly. That does not mean that there was pressure to change the outcome, and I'm sorry, but until somebody shows otherwise through evidence, there's no reason why we should believe that.
I'm sorry, but the idea that somebody just chasing an update is always done, and can I just check where we are with that? We really would like to get it done. And that there's no concept there could have been any bullying because anyone is just asking for something done a bit quicker. I'm sorry, but that is a foolhardy suggestion by the Honourable Gentleman. Now, the Prime Minister has come to the House many times, as honourable members would like to suggest, but he hasn't answered the questions. And the Prime Minister himself set the terms. Either he misled the House or he was reckless with the truth, and those are the terms that he set. Multiple people have lost their jobs over this Prime Minister's decision to appoint Mandelson. 2 civil servants and 2 political appointments. For a man who said he would never sack his staff for his own appointments, that's quite something. His judgment has also shown that he was happy to appoint people to Cabinet who had lied to the police, where he knew full well that they had done that. So there is a pattern. Now, Ollie Robbins lost his job for implementing the wishes of the Prime Minister by the book. Now, either he followed due process and was sacked for doing so, or there was no due process and he was sacked because there wasn't. The Prime Minister's position so far is that the former is true. It cannot be both, in which case Ollie Robbins should never have been sacked. He did his job under immense pressure and was stripped of the agency to say no. Mr. Speaker set out the start of the debate. This motion does not attribute guilt onto anyone. The vote today is for an investigation by the Privileges Committee, and that is a committee chaired by my friend and neighbour, the Honourable Member for South Leicestershire. And I want to place on record my total faith in his probity and professionalism, because unfortunately we have seen in previous approaches and previous investigations that some may seek in future to undermine individuals. Now, I appreciate there are a range of views across the Labour benches, and some seem to genuinely believe the Prime Minister's version of events. Others share concerns on this side of the House, even if they're reticent to express those. I do want to point out that in the entirety of this debate, at no point has there been more than 9 Labour MPs at the backbenches who were elected before 2024. Now, I would say to those members, having been a new MP and having been through this process and watched it, having once voted, as I've said previously in this House, in a way that I deeply regret on the Owen Paterson vote, I had planned to vote against him. The reason for that was because I sat on those benches and I watched the debate and I was horrified by what I saw. And despite the enormous pressure from people around me, I went, right, OK, I've got to do what's right, and I'm going to vote with those brave 13 who did the right thing. I then went downstairs to breastfeed my daughter, who was very young at the point, I think she was just turning 6 months. And when I came back up, there was only 1 minute left of the bell. And when I looked into the 2 voting lobbies, I couldn't see those 13 friends who'd gone the right way on the vote. So I was stood there on my own, absolutely terrified, not knowing what to do, seeing everyone else going through the other votes. And I never ever accept feeling that way ever again. And I say to the new intake, there is a reason why none of the other previous intakes are on these benches. There is a reason why anyone so far from the older intake who has spoken have said to you, if your gut is telling you there's a problem, there is a problem.
Absolutely.
They have given you their advice. Now, I know they tell us often how dismissive you all are of them, but there is... Oh, apologies. Forgive me, Madam Deputy Speaker. You would never be dismissive of anyone, so I correct myself entirely. But I would just say there is a reason, and you should take that time to reflect and... Oh, my goodness. I can only apologise again. There is a reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, why older intake Labour MPs have chosen not to come and defend the Prime Minister today, because they've seen this show before. They know what happens, and they know that actually your gut will be telling you the right thing to do. And I also congratulate those who've been brave enough to speak out today and to share their views. The House will recall the government did attempt to whip Labour MPs against giving the Intelligence and Security Committee a role in assessing and releasing the Mandelson files, as per the humble address. Parliament asserted itself on that day, and we must do so again. A vote against this motion will show loud and clear that you followed the party line and that you forgave and ignored your conscience. No, that you... Oh. There is precedent here. In 2022, the House unanimously passed a motion to allow the inquiry into whether the Prime Minister had misled Parliament. We Conservatives supported that motion and not a single MP blocked it. So I do know how hard these are, because we've been there. And I supported the committee's findings that Boris Johnson had misled the House. So my advice to Labour MPs is to listen to your conscience and do what you know is right. Members will thank themselves as years pass by to be free from the weight of regret. But also, I would also point out that matters of standards should never be whipped. And I'd be interested to know if any Labour MP is willing to stand up today and say that the threat of having the whip removed has not been made, because so far none of them have said that. And I would also say to the front bench that there is... Indeed. Well, pressure seems to be an issue we need to debate more. I would also say to Labour MPs considering speaking in this debate, you may find that even before the vote, the government changes. The members may find that before the vote this evening, your party has changed its mind and you are no longer being whipped. So I would encourage Labour MPs to reflect on whether this is the record that a member may wish to have, because whips do change their minds if members represent themselves to them. So can you truly say that the whole story is out there?
Oh, sorry. Can I remind the Honourable Lady, it's not me. Much of this has been addressed to me. I'm not voting this afternoon. I won't be speaking. Alicia Kearns.
And I accept fully, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I do know better, so I apologise. The whole story is not out there, and a future release it will have to be given.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and she makes a wise and experienced speech today to this House, reflecting on her personal experience in previous votes. Would she agree with me that the question we must all ask today is, whichever side of the lobby we vote, we must justify that to our constituents?
Absolutely. And some members have suggested today that their constituents don't really care about process. They don't really care about whether the truth is told in this chamber, and they're not really interested in this privileged motion. That is most certainly not the case, and that is something members will experience in months to come. Madam Deputy Speaker, I fear that a future release of files will contradict the Prime Minister's version of events further. We discovered only this morning that Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor, was also appointed before being vetted. I asked the government about his vetting in February. I was told that national security vetting for the current National Security Advisor was conducted to the usual standard set for developed vetting. Does that sound familiar? Clearly something again went awry. Clearly due process was not followed with the National Security Advisor, and once again we in this House were told that due process was followed. Judgment is revealed not in the exception but in the pattern, and there is a very clear pattern in this situation. I will very happily give way.
I'm very grateful to her, and she comes to the crux of this debate today, was due process followed or not? Would she agree with me that the simple fact that vetting must always come before any appointment, the simple fact, we've heard this morning, evidence in the Select Committee where that was not the case, is very clear that due process was not followed.
The Honourable Gentleman is completely right, and we were told repeatedly and consistently that due process was not followed. Now, anyone who wants to tell me it was, I know it wasn't, because I've been through security clearance, which was the first level, where I had to wait for 7 months to hand in my notice to my existing job so I could join the civil service until I got security clearance. Then there was developed vetting, where again I had to wait about 6 months before I could take up that role. And then I went through strap clearance as well. So I've been through the work, so I've been through all of it. And it doesn't sit right with me, the accusation that due process was followed. And fundamentally to the point about Ollie Robbins, it cannot be that due process was followed and therefore he deserved to be sacked. He must have breached due process if he needed to be sacked. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be voting in favour of this motion. And tonight I will end my day with a clear conscience, knowing that I voted to give my communities the answers that they deserve. And I hope that every member can say the same. Because we are asking whether the man leading our country has the judgment the office necessitates and a commitment to the truth that is required. And at this moment, the country does not believe that that commitment to the truth is there. So let's have it, and let's see if it was.
Brian Leishman.
Good afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker. And from the outset, I wish to state my support for justice to be delivered for all the people who were harmed by Jeffrey Epstein and for those involved with him who committed such despicable violations and crimes to be held responsible. Yeah. The people who were exploited should be at the front of all our minds. It is my opinion that this motion does not come from anything noble, a deep concern for those that were trafficked or abused, nor is it about the protection of democracy or anything of that nature. Of course, this motion is designed to embarrass the Prime Minister and put Labour MPs in an awkward position. And not for the first time as Labour MPs, we are in an awkward position. And not for the first time is because of the Prime Minister's actions and not that of the opposition. The accusation of secrecy and the goings-on in this place are serious political issues that mean the world to a whole host of our constituents. Sometimes it's in the traditions and protocols of this place, which to many often seem archaic, arcane and totally unrelatable to how they lead their daily lives. People are regularly frustrated at ministers not answering questions at the dispatch box, and equally shadow ministers with amnesia at their own record when in power. People are infuriated watching politicians do the media circuit, slavishly going through the party lines no matter how illogical they may be. All of it just breeds utter contempt in politics and for politicians. People are sick to the back teeth of it all. Now, when I'm out campaigning and knocking on people's doors, they tell me just how irritated they are with politicians who endlessly try to deflect and defend the most absurd and wrong decisions, just because of the party that they represent. Of course, this is not unique to the Labour Party. All parties indulge in this. Conservatives defending the record of austerity that ripped the heart out of communities up and down the United Kingdom. Many in the SNP refuse to take responsibilities for failures in housing, education, health, local authorities and vital public services. But credit to the Right Honourable Member for Aberdeen South for alluding, touching the lightness of touch on some of the travails that his party have experienced. Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want my Labour government to be better than that. It really is a low bar that we have been set, but people genuinely think that we are all the same. They see no real difference. And to echo other honourable and right honourable members, I think the Prime Minister should refer himself to the Privileges Committee. It would say to Parliament, and more importantly, our voters, the country, that he knows he will be proved innocent, that he will be vindicated, that he's got nothing to hide. And importantly, that transparency and accountability are at the heart of our democracy. I say to colleagues on this side of the House that we were elected based on the promise of providing change, an end to the scandals and the cover-ups that people are so disgusted with, whether it be Tory lockdown parties or trips to castles, hundreds of miles to test eyesight. The SNP abandonment of care homes and the do not resuscitate notices placed on patients without their consent during COVID. We need to be better than all of that. But truthfully, in our first 20 months in government, the public don't think that we are. And because of the mistakes, the decline in standards, the secrecy, the lack of accountability, then we are paving the way for a hardline, far-right government to come next. And be under no illusions. That government would set the country back to the days of mass unemployment, dire poverty and inequality. They want to create a society that is as intolerant as it is unfair. And it absolutely terrifies me. In finishing, I say to any colleague that if you think I'm wrong, then please do have a look at the polls. Look at the by-election results we have had. The Prime Minister said we would put country before party. Today, with his vote, he has the perfect opportunity to do just that. The Prime Minister needs to stop putting Labour MPs in awkward situations. The open and honest thing would be to refer himself to the committee. But if he won't, then I'm afraid he has left me with no choice. I will have to vote for this motion this afternoon.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the start of this debate, when Mr. Speaker was in the chair, he reminded the House that this debate was not a trial of the Prime Minister. This was a debate about whether or not an issue should be put to the Privileges Committee. I do think we all need to remember that. And he also said, for the record, that when the debate became repetitive, he might consider taking a closure motion. I'm sorely tempted to move one, Madam Deputy Speaker, but not yet. It saddens me deeply that we are where we are today. It saddens me that this has been presented by some members of the government benches as a ruse before the local government elections. This is about something very fundamental to many of us. It's about the truth, the probity, the integrity of this House and every man and woman that sits in it. I've heard some very courageous speeches from the government benches this afternoon. And I applaud each and every one of those people who made them, because I know just how difficult, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is. Mr. Johnson has been referred to frequently. I was one of the first, possibly the first, to call publicly for the resignation of Johnson as Prime Minister. That was not a happy circumstance. I did not enjoy it. I do not like taking on my own side. But I believed then, as indeed I believe now, that man was not fit to be Prime Minister. But I also know that what I did and said was right, as I believe that those honourable members on the other side of the House who have spoken this afternoon in support of the motion are doing what they believe to be right. I'm horrified, Madam Deputy Speaker, to have to believe that House business is whipped. It should not be. It's been said repetitively that actually the sensible thing to have happened would be for the Prime Minister to refer himself to the Privileges Committee, but if that's not going to happen, then I think we all need to understand that out there are people waiting to see what we do. Can we be trusted? Never mind, can the Prime Minister be trusted? Can we be trusted? Yeah. Can we be trusted to take the proper decision tonight? Every single one of us in the morning is going to get up and look in the mirror to either put on makeup or shave. Or both. And we have to look. My honourable friend reminds me that he did say incorrectly that the vote on Johnson, the call for the resignation of Johnson, was not taken until after the Privileges Committee findings. He's actually quite wrong. That call was made well before it went to the Privileges Committee. So let's come back to what I was trying to say. Every single one of us has to be able to look in the mirror in the morning and live with ourselves. I hope very much that the government whips will withdraw the whipping tonight, so that honourable members can vote according to their conscience. And I believe that if that is so, and if that is done, then this matter will be referred entirely properly to the Privileges Committee, and then we can get on with the job that after the King's speech we will be here to do again, which is to devote our concerns to the cost of living, to fuel prices, to the manner in which the hospitality business is being destroyed, to all the matters that we ought to be here discussing today, rather than discussing this. I beg my friends on the other side of the House to do the right thing tonight.
Chris Kane.
Mr. Speaker, a referral to the Privileges Committee, particularly involving a Prime Minister, should be rare. The bar should be high because we have so many other processes available to us in this place. And with this issue, many of these processes are already in action. The Foreign Affairs Committee, under the excellent chairing of the Right Honourable Member for Islington South and Finsbury, is taking evidence and will report in due course. The humble address from this House has put a process in place to ensure transparency, and the Government is complying with it. Then there is attendance in this chamber. I have no doubt the Prime Minister will continue to make himself available here, as he has done in recent weeks through statements and at PMQs, both because it's right and because the processes of this House require it. And let us be honest about the timing. Bringing this forward 1 week before elections is political. Now, I do not criticise that. It's part of the system we operate in, but we should be clear about it. I've been reflecting this week on the concept of pressure. We have heard from senior civil servants that there was pressure to proceed with the appointment of Peter Mandelson before vetting had concluded. They have said that the pressure was inappropriate. They have not said the pressure was inappropriate, simply that it existed. The Prime Minister, for his part, has been clear. He has said that this was the kind of pressure that exists in any high-performing environment where decisions need to be made and progress needs to happen. That is very different from pressure to do something you are not comfortable with. But I suppose the truth is that my experience of pressure is not the same as the Prime Minister's. A degree of recalibration is required on my part. As a member of the Public Accounts Committee, we apply pressure to senior civil servants every week. We expect them to account for their decisions, often in difficult circumstances and under public scrutiny. And time again, I am struck by their professionalism and their ability to handle that pressure. I am equally struck by the Prime Minister's ability to do the same. Whether at Prime Minister's questions or in extended sessions like the one we held last week, where he answered questions for over 2 hours. That level of scrutiny is constant and unrelenting. In my time in this House, I have never known the Prime Minister to act in anything other than good faith. He is focused, serious and determined to deliver in extraordinary difficult circumstances. Is he perfect? Of course not. None of us are. His is an almost impossible job in turbulent times. But that is the nature of government. The public elects a government and gives it time to govern. That requires consistency, judgment, and at times the ability to change course as circumstances demand. What it does not require is abandoning the course entirely at the first sign that another ship looks to be sailing more smoothly. We are, quite clearly, in the middle of a storm. Not a passing squall, but sustained, difficult conditions. Economic pressure, global instability, and challenges at home that have been building for years. In those circumstances, what matters is not whether the sea is calm, but is whether the vessel is seaworthy and whether the person at the helm knows how to navigate. Now, no ship is perfect. There will always be repairs to make, adjustments to take, and decisions that with hindsight might have been handled differently. But abandoning a ship mid-storm or trying to sink it is a risk. Because that other ship, finding another ship that is sailing in different waters is sailing under different conditions. And let's be honest, that other ship, well, the same storm is heading its way too. So the real question is not whether things are perfect, it's whether we have a vessel that can withstand the conditions and a captain who can steer it. Now, when I look across the chamber, I do not see credible alternatives ready to take us through what lies ahead. On one side, we have a Conservative approach that too often feels like a ship designed for a different age. A wooden ship, not equipped for the realities of the world we are living in now. A vision that looks backwards rather than forwards. And in the other, I see the SNP. If you cannot reliably build and run the ferries that connect your own communities, it does raise serious questions about the readiness to navigate a much bigger journey. Theirs is less of a fully equipped vessel and more like something assembled for the appearance of movement rather than the reality of it.
So we give way in that point?
Of course I will.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Does he agree that it appears the SNP don't have a ship right now? They must have a submarine.
Order. I think honourable members will find this is not a debate about the SNP, and perhaps we all ought to confine remarks to the subject that we're actually debating. Chris Kane.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To finish my metaphor, but not about the SNP, you hold steady. You make the adjustments that are needed and you focus on getting safely to better conditions. That is the task that's in front of us. And that is why I will be supporting the Prime Minister to continue doing the job he was elected to do, to keep a steady hand on the tiller and guide the country through challenging times. And I would urge colleagues to do the same, because in the end, this is about stability, seriousness and leadership. And that is what this country needs. Today's motion feels to me like a distraction from that mission, and so I urge colleagues across the chamber to vote against the motion today.
Anne Davis.
Madam Llefarydd. The Prime Minister has called this motion a stunt and pure politics. But the Prime Minister and Labour MPs rallying around him forget the seriousness of the allegations against him. That is, misleading the House of Commons over statements relating to the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, an individual with well-documented links to the convicted sex offender and human trafficker. To swat away these allegations as a desperate political stunt, refusing them to be investigated properly by the Committee of Privileges, is an insult to us all. An insult to the public who were promised transparency and openness by the Prime Minister's Labour government, and an insult to victims and survivors of violence and abuse who deserve so much better from those who claim to represent them. What Parliament is being asked today is a straightforward question about whether serious concerns regarding the Prime Minister should be examined properly and independently. If the Prime Minister insists that he has done nothing wrong, then surely the Privilege Committee will come to that same conclusion. And if Labour believe that everything is in order, why have they forced their MPs to vote against the motion today? It begs the question, what does the Prime Minister have to hide? The Prime Minister promised change, and people across Wales gave him a mandate for that change. But what did the public get instead? Misjudgments, incompetence, a lack of transparency at the heart of government, and no real accountability. I put myself forward to become a Member of Parliament because, to be frank, I was fed up of Partygate, the betting scandal, the 200,000 that Vaughan Gethin had accepted in order to fund his own leadership campaign. I thought we're better than this. As residents, as constituents, we are better than this. And people deserve a government which is honest and transparent, and we certainly haven't had that in the 2 years that I've been sitting here on these benches. The Prime Minister's tried to wash his hands of Mandelson's appointment, hiding behind processes, procedure and the actions of civil servants, destroying decent people's lives, only to hobble on for another few weeks. And even if the Prime Minister's loyalists vote this motion down today, Labour and the Prime Minister himself will have shown their true colours. In just over a week, people of Wales have a chance to give their verdict, and they will.
Alex Barros-Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise in this debate, first and foremost, to reiterate, as other colleagues have said, my fullest solidarity with the victims of Epstein. And we should always maintain them at the forefront of our mind, notwithstanding the absence of them from the motion. It is something I know many colleagues across both ends of the House have referenced, and I'm sure will continue to do so. In respect of this motion before us, I want to be clear that I will vote against it, not because I have to be told to, but because the case is absolutely not made out. And given some of the contributions made about shaving in the makeup or shaving in the morning or putting makeup on in the morning, in considering and reflecting on the vote that will be cast tonight, I will have no compunction whatsoever and have absolutely no doubt in my mind when I go through the lobbies today that I will have made the right decision for the reasons, and I do not need to have insinuations to impugn my integrity to the opposites. And before I explain why I am making that case and that decision, I will happily give way.
Grateful for the honourable member giving way, and of course every member is entitled to make their decision in either the lobby. They have to justify it to the electorate. For that reason, does the honourable member believe that having a 3-line whip is necessary?
Alex Barros-Curtis.
It's an irrelevant point, and the point that I would make, I've already said that regardless of the position of the party, I don't need to be told how I will vote on this for the reason that the case is not made out. And he says, if people will stop chuntering, the individuals who have said that they have to look in the mirror tomorrow. Every decision we make in this place, regardless on this motion or on amendments, on legislation, we do, I have no doubt, with integrity and with our best motivations of our constituents in mind. So the need to remind me or my colleagues of that today suggests more about the person making the statement than it does about me and the decision I made. So as I said, I will vote against the motion because I do not believe the case has been made out. And in my time as a solicitor, I've seen many witness statements and particulars of claim. And if I hear and reflect on what the Leader of the Opposition laid out as her case today, I thought it was one of the most poorly made out cases in my professional lifetime. Well, if he waits to hear why I think that, then I will happily give way in a moment. This motion cuts across existing procedures, as has been said, and that just a few weeks ago, everyone in this House jointly, unanimously agreed, supported and initiated. And as I said, and I will go on to explain, it lacks any credibility or evidential basis. You can chunter some more, but maybe listen to the basis on why I reached my decision, and then I will happily give way in a moment. So, I will turn to, as I say, the lack of evidence to make out this case. But before I do, I want to mention, as others have mentioned, the integrity of the Prime Minister in and of itself. I've known the Prime Minister for a number of years, and I know that he is a man of integrity and that he will act without fear or favour and will always be the hardest critic on himself. He has apologised, and rightly so, for the poor and incorrect decision to appoint Peter Mandelson in the first place. He's done it in this House, he's done it to the country, and he has done it, most importantly, to the victims of Epstein. He's very eager, I will give way.
Very grateful to the honourable gentleman. He's being most generous. But we haven't really heard the case yet, given that colleagues opposite will be in a similar position to the honourable gentleman. They will know the Prime Minister. They will have known him for years. They will be sure of his integrity or otherwise. Why does he think there should be a three-line whip imposed on members opposite? Even the member for Bishop Auckland, who spoke with his cause, could see that it wasn't a good idea. But the honourable gentleman doesn't seem to see it. But as a good lawyer, maybe he'll be able to share the argument with the House.
I appreciate his patronising tone, but I will simply say this. I have said that I don't need to be told how to vote in this because I do not believe the case is made out, as I will go on to explain now if I can make some progress. And I underline this by reiterating what the Speaker said earlier and what I said to him when he was in the chair, that of course the question here is not about the application that was put before him, and he's rightly made the decision as he is required to once it came to him. But I am clear that from those who put the application to him for him to have to make the decision, it is a nakedly political stunt to submit that application in the first place. And that's not just because of what the motion is before us, but because of the shape-shifting of the opposition party leaders on this issue since The Guardian broke the story on the 16th of April. I'll give way.
I'll give it to my honourable friend, making a really powerful statement to the House. Isn't the reality that this is about a leader of the opposition who, just like with her call for us to join the US in attacking and join the war in Iran, she called the Prime Minister a liar, and the evidence has shown that there is absolutely no basis for it. Isn't the reality that this is just the leader of the opposition once again shooting from the hip?
I thank him for his intervention. I completely agree, even if it was perhaps slightly askew from the point I'm about to make, but I think it goes to consistency on this issue and many others. And I think, as I said, the shape-shifting of the position of the party leaders, rather than wait for the evidence, we know that both the Leader of the Opposition and the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton had already made up their minds 2 weeks ago. I've got here, I will at least make a point and make the point, and then I'll happily give way. On the 17th of April, this is the day after the Guardian story was broken, the Lib Dems put out a press release. Starmer must be investigated by Privileges Committee over the decision to overrule Mandelson's failed security vetting. But that was found wanting because the evidence was showed otherwise, as was proven when the Prime Minister came here at the earliest opportunity on that Monday, the 20th of April, and laid before this House the evidence, and Sir Ollie Robbins backed that up in his evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee on the 21st of April. I'll give way.
Member for giving way. He mentioned the Guardian story on the 16th of April. The Prime Minister found out on the 14th of April, so the earliest opportunity would have been the 15th of April at Prime Minister's questions, wouldn't it?
Yeah. The Prime Minister already addressed this when that was put to him in this House a number of times in the following days, whereby he said he was trying to secure the answers to the questions which he put on that evening, and the officials were not able to answer, so that he could then, as he said, and as other colleagues and Cabinet colleagues have made clear, at the earliest opportunity, then come back in order to update this House, as is rightly the case. I go back to the timeline of the shape-shifting of the opposition. On that same Friday, the 17th of April, the Leader of the Opposition went on national radio and television, saying it is completely preposterous for us to believe that civil servants would have cleared a political appointee who had failed security vetting. The Prime Minister is taking us for fools, and she called for him to go. A standard that, as other colleagues have elaborated on and I won't dwell on, has not previously and consistently been applied to the proven lawyer before Boris Johnson. So we've got the shape-shifting of the opposition parties on this point, and therefore the motion before us today dwells on two aspects: due process and, of course, the question of pressure. In respect of due process, Madam Deputy Speaker, now explain why I do not think the motion and the evidence is made out. I note the motion itself doesn't critique the process itself, which, as this debate has played out over recent weeks, has shown to be seriously deficient and lacking. That has necessitated the necessary reviews and changes at the Prime Minister's order, as some of this debate today has elaborated on. Indeed, this motion asserts, without actual evidence that has been I can't even read that has withstood further testimony from key officials to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. And we know the Prime Minister was not told about the UK security vetting's recommendation to not grant Peter Mandelson clearance, that he was not told about that in many subsequent weeks. And Sir Chris Wormwood confirmed that due process was followed. So I do not accept that that case has been made out. And when we turn to the question of no pressure, the Leader of the Opposition made great play of her selected quotes. And I have Hansard before me from Prime Minister's questions of the 22nd of April. And it is quite clear, as the Prime Minister starts his answer to her question, that he will deal directly with the question of pressure in relation to the decision to appoint Prime Minister Peter Mandelson and to put him in place. The Prime Minister, is clearly referring to the parts of Sir Ollie's evidence of the 21st of April to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee on the specific point about whether or not pressure was brought to bear on the outcome of the vetting process. This was also the gist of the Leader of the Opposition's preceding question, actually, to the Prime Minister, to the question that the Prime Minister was answering. It is also notable that just today, Sir Philip Barton substantiated the position that there are two different types of pressure, and whilst there was pressure to get on with making a decision, which the honourable member earlier alluded to, he then went on to say he was very clear, quote, that he was not aware of any pressure on the substance of the vetting decision, which is what this motion goes to. I'm conscious of time, Madam Deputy Speaker, and so I want to conclude by expressing solidarity to my honourable friend, for South Shields, who spoke with great power earlier. And her and I have spoken about some of these issues before I have the privilege of being in this place, and of course I offer my support. But as my honourable friend for Bishop Auckland referred to in his excellent speech, I want to be clear that from the tone from some in this debate, it is clear that this is not about the substance of the issue, but it is about trying to exploit political partisan gain. And it is, I have no doubt in my mind, that certain political opponents will seek to make the lives of my honourable friend and others difficult, just like they have when it comes to other serious issues, such as impugning our decisions on, for example, grooming gangs, and putting out social media targeting us, which then means we have become the subject of death threats, and as my honourable friend for South Shields elaborated on, much worse for her and her constituency. Indeed, the Tory front bench were nodding at this when my honourable friend for Bishop Auckland talked to this earlier. They probably, as I said, have already got those digital media attacks ready to define us as voting to cover up. But I have no doubt, there we go, I see they've confirmed it already again, which I think belies exactly their intent behind this. There is no doubt in my mind that it was a mistake to appoint Peter Mandelson, and the Prime Minister has taken responsibility for that. But as the quality of certain contributions today have pointed to, and as I've explained my reasoning for why I will not support this today, it is clear to me that rather than seeking to uphold standards, this risks undermining them. We should get on with the business of government. We should get on with some of the issues the Right Honourable Member mentioned earlier about the issues that our constituents are most concerned about. We should focus on the job in hand, and it's for all of those reasons why I will not be supporting this motion today.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm mindful of Mr Speaker's earlier advice about repetition. I will keep my remarks short and to the point. We've had a number of speeches where other members on the other side have debated whether there is a sufficient threshold to refer this matter to the Privileges Committee. Yet, I have to say, if you look at the evidence, there is clearly some very, very concerning issues amongst those documents that have been released into the public domain, what has been said on the floor of this House and what has not been said on the floor of this House. Now, we take the advice given by Simon Case when he was Cabinet Secretary back in November 2024. It's very clear from that document that was released as part of the humble address that the Prime Minister was advised, if he wanted to make a political appointment, that vetting should be done before that appointment is made. We now know, of course, that didn't happen. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, when one takes the letter that Chris Wormholt, as then Cabinet Secretary, sent to the Prime Minister in September of 2025, he asserts that the process that was followed was in line with the advice given by Simon Case to the Prime Minister. And this is important, because the Prime Minister has referred back to that letter as a reason why due process was followed, yet that letter seems, on the face of it, to be inaccurate in itself, and therefore that is something that we need to investigate in this House. And then, of course, we come to the answer to the Prime Minister gave at Prime Minister's questions on the 22nd of April, where, of course, he removed the word that with any, which implied that there had been no pressure, that there had not been any pressure rather than that pressure. And when this was raised by my right honourable friend, the member for Brentwood and Ongar, at Cabinet Office questions last Thursday, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster asserted on the floor of the House that he says, "I think the difference between the words that and any is not of any material relevance." Now, I think anyone with a basic grasp of English, and having heard the testimony of Ollie Robbins versus the answer the Prime Minister gave, would clearly say that he has tried, at least in my view, to misrepresent what Mr Robbins told the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. So I do believe that as well is an extremely, extremely powerful reason why this matter needs to be referred. And then I come to the case of the unanswered questions, the evidence that we don't have. And I refer back again to Simon Case's advice to the Prime Minister back in 2024, because what was released as part of the humble address is just Mr Case's evidence. The box for the Prime Minister's comments remains blank. Now, are we expected to believe that the Prime Minister did not respond to the advice given him by the Cabinet Secretary, or has that advice been withheld from this House? A question I think that does need to be answered. And then there are other matters. There are the evidence that the Prime Minister did see regarding Peter Mandelson, some of which he has confirmed to this House of Prime Minister's questions in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. But he has refused to answer whether he was aware of Mr Mandelson's business links, particularly those connected in Russia and his directorship of Sistema, even after Russia invaded Ukraine. And then there's the matter of documents which the government is unwilling to even confirm even exist. For example, Mr Mandelson's declaration of interest, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've asked repeatedly whether that document simply exists, not whether it's going to be published in full at this point, and we do not get answers. And then we find today Morgan McSweeney giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and confirming that a meeting took place in December regarding the first meeting that took place regarding the potential appointment of Mr Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, and the Cabinet Office have said they have no record of this meeting. So were there no minutes taken at this meeting? If not, why not? Or have those minutes somehow vanished? All of these, I think, are very, very good reasons why this matter needs to be referred to.
Honourable friend, I mean, the Prime Minister has told the House, and this is about the allegation that the Prime Minister may have misled this House, that all due process was followed. The decision to appoint Peter Mandelson was made, we're told, by Morgan McSweeney this morning, in a meeting for which there are absolutely no records and notes, despite extensive searches. At the beginning of this process, they'd failed in due process, and yet he has stood there repeatedly telling us that due process was followed. On that alone, there would be cause to allow the Privileges Committee to investigate, and members opposite do need to look deep in their consciences before they vote against.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with my right honourable friend. It's absolutely astonishing that the decision to appoint an individual to the most important ambassadorial role that we can offer took place in a meeting of which there now appears to be no record. So we have three clear issues here. We have a discrepancy in documents that have been published. We have inaccurate recollection of events in response to questions in this House, whether inadvertent or deliberate, and we have a failure to provide full transparency in relation to this very, very sorry saga. Now, as my honourable friend, the member for North Dorset, said, the Prime Minister is losing in the court of public opinion, and therefore the best route for him now is to refer himself to the Privileges Committee to make his case and perhaps to clear his name. Because as my right honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough, said, it's not always the cock-up. And we know in this case the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson was a cock-up. It is the conspiracy that brings you down.
Yeah.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And before I start, let me also pay tribute to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, because their views have been heard far too little in these debates. Let me also address some of what I feel to be quite patronising comments made to backbench Labour MPs today. Nobody has asked me to speak today, and nobody has put any pressure on me. In fact, colleagues on these benches know that I have my own mind and will express it as I see fit. At a moment of genuine challenge for families across the country, when households are concerned about rising prices, instability abroad and pressure on living standards, the opposition has brought a motion that is ultimately more concerned with political point scoring than practical solutions, and that is deeply regrettable. Because the British public expect and deserve better than Westminster at its most performative. They expect seriousness and rightly expect scrutiny where scrutiny is due, but also expect Parliament to focus on the issues that shape their daily lives. The bills landing on their doormats, the cost of food in the supermarkets, the price of fuel at the pumps, and the strength of the economy in uncertain times. On Peter Mandelson, let me be absolutely clear. He should never have been appointed as our ambassador. The Prime Minister recognised that. He's apologised for that. He did so properly, repeatedly, with transparency and accountability, and with respect to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. That was the right course of action, and I would not have expected anything less from the Prime Minister, because I too have known him for many years. I have worked with him as he sought to rid our party of the stain of anti-Semitism, which has now infected others. I've seen him stand up to Putin when others have taken bribes from his allies. Madam Deputy Speaker, given those processes of transparency are in place and underway, which they are, why, it has to be asked, are the parties opposite working to ride roughshod over investigation processes they all agreed to? Well, we've heard it here earlier in the debate. Social media clicks and cheap headlines ahead of significant elections. The fact is that the Government has agreed to and is complying with the humble address to allow scrutiny of the Mandelson appointment in this place, to see the facts, the advice that was available to the Prime Minister at the time Mandelson was appointed. And my right honourable friend, the member for Islington South and Finsbury, is chairing a select committee inquiry to which key figures involved in the Mandelson appointment have rightly been summoned. And the Prime Minister has come to this House repeatedly to answer questions about that appointment. As has been already expressed, politically motivated use of the Privileges Committee procedures risks undermining those procedures. What is clear, the circumstances the opposition hoped would come to light, which they hoped might bring down a successful Labour government, have been nothing more than conspiracy. First, they said that the Prime Minister must have known that UK security vetting recommendation was to reject the vetting for Peter Mandelson. Yet Ollie Robbins confirmed to the Select Committee last week that he had chosen not to share that crucial information with the Prime Minister. They were wrong. They said that the Prime Minister was wrong to say that due process was followed, yet Chris Wormold has confirmed in a letter to the Prime Minister that the process was followed. In his own words, the evidence I have reviewed leads me to conclude that appropriate processes were followed in both the appointment and the withdrawal of the former ambassador to Washington. Again, they were wrong. How could the Prime Minister have taken any other assessment than due process was followed when it was spelled out to him in black and white from his own officials? Those are not rumours, they are not talking points, they are facts, and facts matter in this place. Many good colleagues on these benches, and indeed I'm sure some on the others, know deep down that the #1 issue facing our constituents is the cost of living fallout from Trump's war in Iran, a war aped on by parties opposite. They know that because when we've been out on the doors in the lead-up to the elections in May, that's what voters are telling every one of us. They're worried about their bills, the prices at the pumps and the prices in their supermarkets. And while some in this House want to engage in political stunts, this very afternoon the Prime Minister is convening a committee on the response to the conflict in the Middle East, on how we support the British economy, our services and, most importantly, our constituents. What is clear is that there is only one party focused on the job of delivering for the British people, and it is the one that the country voted for in the last election. The Conservative Party, after 14 years of chaos, scandal and economic recklessness, now wants to lecture anyone else on standards in public life is galling. From the party that gave us Partygate, revolving door Prime Ministers, cronyism, collapsing public services, Liz Truss's catastrophic experiment that sent mortgages soaring and punished working families for Conservative failures. Meanwhile, they collude with the SNP who asked voters...
I've made the point previously. Please, will members confine themselves to debating the issue at hand and not into fighting the local election campaign, perhaps. Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Those are the issues we could have been debating today, but instead we are debating a political stunt. This government is standing up for the British people, showing leadership in our support for Ukraine, bringing our national rail services back into public ownership, delivering our historic Employment Rights Act, amongst many others. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I vote this afternoon, I do so knowing full well I was elected to serve on the priorities that matter to the people of Paisley and